When a god with 3 trillion HP descended from the heavens to erase Chen Yang from existence, an entire city prepared to watch him die seconds later, they were watching the god die instead. No one understood how a young undead summoner, dismissed as a worthless F-rank nobody only days earlier, had become powerful enough to make monsters, armies, and even divine beings fear his name. The answer began with a ridiculous mistake, a billion impossible attribute points, and one simple decision that should have gotten him killed before his first dungeon even had time to load. But Chen Yang was never supposed to survive by the rules, and once his skeleton army started growing, every so-called genius around him learned the same lesson. The game was no longer fair. Story begin. He stared at the unfamiliar world, stunned. He had awakened as an undead summoner, a class respectable enough to frighten normal people. Another world meant another dangerous opportunity. The joke was his talent, F-rank replication, officially bargain bin material. The punchline was the billion free attribute points sitting beneath it. His talent made normal comparisons useless. Replication added 1 summon for every 5,000 spirit. Chen Yang immediately dumped points into spirit, driving it to 25,000 in mana skyward. Skeleton summoning now produced 6 soldiers, each striking with absurd spirit-scaled damage. Apparently his new career path was clicking buttons and violating game balance. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. If this continued for half a month, dungeon bosses might need lawyers. Grinning at that possibility, Chen Yang hailed a taxi toward the dungeon hall. The hall swarmed with newly awakened professionals hunting teammates. Chen Yang, already carrying a nuclear-sized cheat, chose to solo level 1-5 Plague Town instead. His level curve kept breaking expectations. A staff member nearly swallowed his tongue. Chen Yang had awakened that very day and wanted to enter alone, so he calmly asked the boss's HP. 38,000. Chen Yang nodded like someone checking a grocery price. During the taxi ride, he had already pushed spirit to 45,263. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. 10 skeleton soldiers now dealt over 40,000 damage each. The spectators wondered whether the rookie had a death wish. Chen Yang considered that adorable. Ignoring the whispers, he crossed the barrier and entered the black portal. Darkness flashed away, revealing misty woods, twisted trees, and one very unfriendly roar. Shapes staggered through the fog. Level 1, 2. Hungry rotting corpses, former townspeople transformed by calamity. Chen Yang finally had something appropriate to test damage on. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. He cast summoning. The ground split with a violent rumble, opening a dark fissure wide enough to make any building inspector resign immediately. 10 skeleton soldiers climbed out through black mist, green flames burning in their eyes. Slash and Devour gave them respectable offense, regeneration, and spirit-scaled health. A roar rolled from Plague Town. The dead settlement seemed to wake at once, and hungry corpses charged through the fog with enthusiastic murder in mind. Chen Yang's skeletons raised their swords. 10 damage numbers around 43,000 appeared, and 10 zombies collapsed before they understood the meeting had started. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. The system awarded EXP and level 2. Chen Yang checked his remaining points, still 999,950,000, and realized scarcity would not be today's problem. The interface remained brutally literal throughout. 10 zombies had vanished on contact, so he headed deeper into town, wondering whether one dungeon run might carry him all the way to level 10. Every crawling undead along the road died to a single skeleton slash. EXP poured in steadily, soon pushing both Chen Yang and his summons higher. He kicked a corpse, hoping for equipment, but it dissolved into black mist. Before he could complain about stingy loot tables, another roar answered. Even the loot struggled to impress. 2 skeletons scouted ahead while the others surrounded him. The formation was so tight, a mosquito would have needed written permission to approach. At the bridge, 60 or 70 zombies charged together. Behind them waddled a huge butcher-like corpse carrying a cleaver and wearing an iron rod. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Chen Yang finally understood the staff member's concern. His scouting skeletons cleverly held the bridgehead, intending to exploit the narrow terrain like veteran soldiers. Amused that skeletons apparently possessed tactical sense, Chen Yang sent 6 more forward. Brute force joined strategy, and another kill notification raised him to level 4. The horde jammed itself on the bridge, allowing only a few zombies through at once. 8 swords waited there, turning the crossing into undead airport security. Chen Yang inspected the mini-boss, level 1-6 Berserk Butcher. Once its escort disappeared, the giant roared and charged with its cleaver raised high. Another boss discovered terrible timing today. 8 skeleton swords fell together. The Berserk Butcher's HP vanished, its body scattered into chunks, and Chen Yang casually rose to level 5. His army made solitude, mostly theoretical. The corpse dropped Butcher's decapitating blade. Chen Yang happily pocketed his first equipment, crossed the bridge, and entered Plague Town's central square. Equipment mattered less than raw scaling. Hundreds of zombies knelt before a platform where a black-robed man conducted a sacrifice. A white-dressed girl hung bound nearby the obvious quest NPC. Chen Yang waved once, sending 8 skeletons forward. Because the praying zombies reacted in small groups, the supposed ritual became an extremely efficient massacre. His army made solitude mostly theoretical. The skeletons bulldozed through nearly 300 enemies. EXP flooded Chen Yang's interface until he passed halfway through level 9 without personally swinging anything. Wizard Ahmad finally shouted at the intruders. Unfortunately, dramatic timing failed him. By the time Chen Yang looked up, the boss's head was rolling away. 8 level 10 skeletons stood around Ahmad's corpse. Chen Yang reached level 10 and appreciated cheating deeply, though the boss's non-existent loot offended him personally. The human cost remained painfully obvious. The settlement screen announced a 17-minute, 34-second clear and a new record, boosting Chen Yang to level 13 before teleporting him outside. The dungeon hall fell silent. Normal 5-person level, 1-5 teams needed hours, while one brand new summoner had finished solo before most people finished lunch. That wound would not disappear quickly. Chen Yang avoided the gathering chaos and opened his reward chest privately, receiving potions, the Berserk skill book, and a blue plague sword. Another enemy became experienced remarkably quickly. The achievement chest added Mina's earring. Chen Yang immediately calculated profits. Berserk and the plague sword could finance better undead summoner skills. Some victories still left scars behind. Mina's earring proved far more interesting. Entering heroic plague town with it could trigger a world-class advancement quest, something normally unavailable before level 20. Heroic monsters carried roughly 10 times normal health. Ahmad would exceed 380,000 HP, meaning Chen Yang's current skeletons could no longer erase him instantly. His army made solitude, mostly theoretical. Rather than gamble, Chen Yang added more spirit and traded his sword plus Berserk for blue-quality skeleton mage summoning. 2 hours later, spirit reached 120,000. He could now summon 25 soldiers dealing 120,000 damage and 25 mages dealing 180,000 magic damage. Subtlety had officially been removed from the build. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. With 50 summons available, Chen Yang returned for Heroic Plague Town. The same staff member recognized him, and the entire hall instantly redirected its attention. Representatives from 3 major legions rushed over, including Heavenly Wolf Vice Commander Ji Boxiao. Chen Yang politely rejected every recruitment pitch without slowing down. Recruitment had become its own battlefield. He handed over his professional card and requested heroic difficulty. This time the staff member wisely skipped the lecture. Yesterday's evidence had done enough talking. Inside, 20 level 8 hungry rotting corpses replaced the original 10, each carrying 10 times the health. Chen Yang admired the difficulty spike with mild disgust. 25 skeleton soldiers rose around him first, forming a defensive shell. Chen Yang believed in overwhelming offense, but he also believed strongly in staying alive. Then 25 skeleton mages appeared. Their fireball damage was obscene, and Chen Yang pointed forward with the confidence of a man ordering same-day delivery. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. A storm of fire landed. All 20 zombies died before taking a step, rewarding 17,200 EXP in seconds and proving heroic difficulty mostly meant better farming. The town answered with a furious roar, and the ground trembled beneath an approaching horde. Chen Yang sent his skeleton army forward like unpaid supernatural contractors. EXP notices stacked continuously as soldiers and mages advanced. By the bridge, the old 60 monster encounter had swollen beyond 100 enemies. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Zombie fish, turtles, and drowned corpses joined the fight from the water. The richer EXP pushed Chen Yang to level 15 while flames swallowed the bridge. Unlike normal mode corpses, these bodies remained behind, making Chen Yang suspect heroic dungeons might be real worlds instead of disposable simulations. Another dungeon became his personal playground. A world-class advancement quest suddenly appeared, Undead Calamity. He needed to find Mina and return the item her father had once given her. Chen Yang accepted immediately. With nearly 1 billion points still waiting, fear felt less useful than curiosity and considerably less entertaining. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Amid the frantic killing, he discovered a class skill book he had missed, Bone Spike Prison, an area control skill capable of restraining enemies. The human cost remained painfully obvious. His spirit stretched its effective radius beyond 600 meters, holding targets for 122 seconds while dealing continuing damage. Chen Yang nearly applauded. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Any monster spotted at long range could now be pinned down and politely informed that death was running slightly ahead of schedule. At the square, every zombie was already watching the entrance. Chen Yang stamped once and unleashed Bone Spike Prison before the first attacker reached him. White spikes exploded across 600 meters, impaling and restraining the crowd. Skeleton soldiers charged while 25 mages prepared enormous fireballs behind them. His army made solitude mostly theoretical. EXP flooded in so quickly, the notifications became visual wallpaper. Within moments, Chen Yang reached level 18, leaving only Mina and Wizard Ahmad alive. Heroic Ahmad was level 25 with 380,000 HP. His offense remained manageable, but he immediately targeted Chen Yang and began casting Shadow Sword. Levels were becoming mere administrative details. 2.5 seconds separated Chen Yang from a potentially ugly lesson about fragile mages. He responded with another Bone Spike Prison. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. A massive spike launched Ahmad upward, interrupting the spell and restraining him for 122 seconds. His boss fight had become involuntary modern art. Boss mechanics rarely survived his arrival. Giant fireballs followed. Ahmad burned into charcoal almost instantly, awarding enough EXP to push Chen Yang to level 20 and storing everything beyond the cap. Amot finally dropped something useful. A robe creating a mana shield worth 10% of total mana, already capable of absorbing over 1.2 million damage. Chen Yang happily decided future points could go almost entirely into spirit. Mina's green quest marker then appeared, apparently impatient to continue the plot. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. He returned her earring and accepted Mina's memories, which required entering her memories, finding Amot again, and killing the wizard once more. The quest unlocked, Fallen Land, Eternal Kingdom. Outside, meanwhile, Yunyang City erupted over the impossible first clear of a heroic dungeon. Rewards usually meant larger problems afterward. Even Qin Sanjin, proud of barely soloing normal Plague Town, became background scenery. Everyone wanted to see the F-rank summoner who had broken history. 3 military academies surrounded Chen Yang with offers reaching 20 million and red quality equipment. He countered. If he missed level 100 within 2 months, he'd enroll. Back home, Chen Yang continued adding points while opening heroic rewards. The next destination was a level 20 world secret realm, so preparation mattered. The world kept widening around him. His achievement chest produced purple equipment, a blue mage skill, and the mysterious king's bone. Unusable items went online immediately for sale. Mercy was never part of this. A courier arrived almost comically fast. Chen Yang kept the golden legendary king's bone, whose stat panel displayed only question marks and suspicious promise. The quest had clearly escalated again. After adding points through the night, he raised spirit to 495,768 and could summon 100 soldiers plus 100 mages. Their damage reached roughly 490,000 and 740,000, while nearly 50 million mana made Amod's robe capable of absorbing almost 5 million damage. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. At the Eternal Kingdom entrance, Qin Sanjin discovered world's secret realms required legion parties. His heroic solo ambitions died at the reception desk. Already bitter that Chen Yang had erased his moment of glory, Qin Sanjin cursed the freak right until Chen Yang calmly appeared beside him. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Hearing the party requirement, Chen Yang borrowed Qin Sanjin's professional card with the casual confidence of someone redefining the word permission. Common sense quietly left the conversation. He used Qin Sanjin's biometrics, tapped through the Legion interface, returned the card, and walked into the secret realm before anyone processed the theft. Recruitment had become its own battlefield. The announcement explained everything. Sanjin Legion had opened Fallen Land, listing Qin Sanjin as commander and Chen Yang as member. The crowd stared. Qin Sanjin immediately chased after him yelling "Dad." Inside, Chen Yang found a desolate world where every mountain, river, and tree radiated death. Another world meant another dangerous opportunity. The quest demanded traveling to Nightfall Town and helping Silver Knights resist the Calamity Army. Chen Yang accepted or tried to, but nothing happened. A timid voice beside him solved the mystery. Qin Sanjin, suddenly shamelessly respectful, asked whether father wanted the Legion quest accepted. The quest had clearly escalated again. Chen Yang's mouth twitched, but he approved. Qin Sanjin instantly obeyed, and the quest panel finally activated for both unwilling relatives. The quest had clearly escalated again. Defend Nightfall Town required killing 500 enemies. Qin Sanjin celebrated because his own advancement mission demanded exactly 500 secret realm monsters. That outcome arrived faster than expected. They reached Nightfall Town while NPCs built fortifications. A countdown warned that the undead army would attack again in less than 18 minutes. Near an inn, they met several exhausted professionals led by Sun Yuerong, vice commander of the Bright Moon Legion, who recognized their unexpected arrival. Recruitment had become its own battlefield. Sun Yuerong admitted her group had entered expecting treasure and instead found nightmare difficulty. After fighting all night, optimism had left without forwarding information. Even ordinary enemies surpassed heroic dungeon bosses. Curious, rather than frightened, Chen Yang asked the question everyone else had learned to dread. How much HP? The quest had clearly escalated again. Regular mobs carried 150,000 HP, with elites behind them. Qin Sanjin's strongest burst barely exceeded 1,000, making the arithmetic personally insulting. The defense captain arrived requesting help against another assault. Sun Yuerong's group looked spiritually retired, while Qin Sanjin showed similar enthusiasm for suicide. The quest had clearly escalated again. Chen Yang calmly set down his cup and stood. If the army was supposedly terrifying, he wanted to inspect the merchandise personally. That wound would not disappear quickly. Qin Sanjin grabbed his great sword and followed, yelling for father to wait. The other professionals reluctantly trailed them toward the darkening town gate. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Gray fog rolled across the horizon like a tidal wave, carrying more than 1,000 blue-glowing undead soldiers beneath it. Among them towered 10-meter siege giants wielding entire trees. Sun Yuerong went pale, recognizing elite undead capable of flattening fortifications and probably confidence. The implication landed harder than expected. The battered Silver Knights charged anyway when their captain ordered the attack, proving ruined kingdoms apparently still manufactured courage in industrial quantities. Qin Sanjin activated Berserk and rushed forward, refusing to look weaker than NPC soldiers. Then Chen Yang's calm voice drifted from behind. Bone Spike Prison. White bone spikes erupted outward for nearly 2 kilometers, piercing the charging army and suspending hundreds of undead above the battlefield. Resistance looked increasingly theoretical from there. Damage numbers around 24,000 filled the air. Everyone stared at the level 2-0 beginner producing enormous area damage as casually as weather. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Chen Yang stamped again. Blood-red summoning arrays spread across the earth, and 200 skeleton soldiers and mages began climbing into the stunned battlefield. His army made solitude mostly theoretical. Witnesses stopped calling Chen Yong an ordinary undead summoner. 200 summons looked closer to a private apocalypse, especially when every mage began forming 734,000 damage fireballs. Qin Sanjin inhaled sharply at the damage, then brightened like a man discovering religion. Apparently, his new faith had one doctrine: follow Father Young everywhere. Chen Yong sat comfortably on a boulder, while EXP messages stacked faster than spam email. The undead kill count already passed 1,085, with overflow EXP safely stored. Satisfied, he calculated that Mina's father would soon be within reach. Qin Sanjin then offered sunflower seeds, earning rare praise for finally contributing strategically. Some victories still left scars behind. Qin Yang accepted the snack and ordered him to loot corpses because his equipment looked embarrassing. Qin Sanjin obeyed with shameless enthusiasm and zero surviving dignity. The undead army disappeared quickly, completing the defense quest for 30,000 EXP. Returning townspeople and silver knights knelt in gratitude, briefly sobering even Chen Yang. That evening's celebration triggered a bigger opportunity. The defense captain offered the dawn of the Eternal Kingdom, a national fortune quest tied directly to Great Qin's fate. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yuerong explained that national fortune missions rewarded precious fortune contribution capable of improving talents. Chen Yang's F-rank replication suddenly looked upgradable. Talent scaling became increasingly absurd afterward. He accepted. The objectives were brutal on paper: kill Grand Mage Manly, purge Silver Moon Lake's undead, and recover Silver City for the survivors. The captain arranged an early departure and urged everyone to rest. Chen Yong agreed, expecting an uneventful night because apparently he still underestimated side plots. Sun Yurong entered his room soon afterward, and their relationship became intimate. She understood exactly what attaching herself to an absurdly powerful rising professional could mean. At dawn, Nightfall's garrison assembled. The captain provided Chen Yang a white horse, and half an hour later they reached the death-soaked withered pine forest. Mist swallowed the road as the horse entered. Twisted branches resembled claws reaching through fog, and a sudden warning about wolves sharpened everyone's attention. Arrival usually meant trouble followed shortly. Qin Sanjin dismounted with his greatsword ready, while the soldiers formed defenses. Massive blood-red wolves immediately burst from both sides of the trees. The level 2-5 dark blood wolves carried stats comparable to major heroic bosses. Sun Yuerong and Qin Sanjin looked toward Chen Yang almost automatically now. Another boss discovered terrible timing today. He stayed mounted and chanted nonsense with impressive confidence. With spirit at 695,000, he summoned 280 skeletons whose strongest attacks already exceeded 1 million damage. Chen Yang casually told his brothers to work. Soldiers charged while mages launched blazing artillery, displaying damage numbers that looked suspiciously like somebody misplaced decimal points. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yuerong nearly cursed. Yesterday, Chen Yang dealt hundreds of thousands. Today he crossed 1 million and simply rode toward a Manli stronghold. Nightfall soldiers followed happily. Qin Sanjin vacuumed loot, and Sun Yuerong privately concluded that last night's decision had produced an astonishing return on investment. Loot remained useful despite the chaos. Chen Yang rode leisurely through the forest while dark blood wolves poured from both sides. Even an unlucky undead rat contributed 860 EXP to the procession. Nothing reached the group alive. Fireballs erased enemies emerging from trees, holes, or shadows, while green EXP messages followed Chen Yang like aggressive confetti. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Silver Moon Lake finally appeared, dominated by a black castle floating above its center. More exciting to Chen Yang was the enormous undead population surrounding it. Qin Sanjin nearly choked at the numbers. The captain offered to lure the horde away if Chen Yang believed he could personally handle Amanli afterward. Curious, Chen Yang asked how anyone planned to distract thousands simultaneously. The captain revealed beast-luring incense, capable of attracting undead within 10 kilometers. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Naturally, Chen Yang wanted to inspect it. The captain reluctantly produced the tiny bottle, probably already sensing that giving him dangerous objects was historically questionable. The epic quest item came with one urgent warning: do not open it. Unfortunately, the stopper was already in Chen Yang's hand. Timing remained undefeated. Every undead creature around Silver Moon Lake awakened together and charged. The ground bounced beneath the group as thousands of monsters converged like an angry supernatural Black Friday. Chen Yang's 280 summons attacked, but sheer numbers overwhelmed their killing speed. Qin Sanjin declared them doomed. Chen Yang remained suspiciously calm. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. He raised one hand and cast Bone Spike Prison. Damage numbers flooded a 475-kilometer radius as countless undead were pierced and suspended overhead. That wound would not disappear quickly. The defense captain simply sat down, overwhelmed. Chen Yang ignored the existential crisis and watched EXP notifications arrive, including 4,400 from one three-legged undead toad. He estimated millions of EXP remained ahead, but water-complicated bone-spiked prison. Ranged enemies could still attack, and the spell merely restrained rather than instantly killed. Sun Yurong volunteered a solution, staring at him with unmistakable devotion. Chen Yang questioned whether anything she possessed could reach a castle over 1 kilometer away. Her purple talent upgraded Eagle Eye into a 3-kilometer ranged aura. Chen Yang grinned and teased that Rong apparently had extraordinarily impressive shooting distance. Talent scaling became increasingly absurd afterward. Blushing, Sun Yurong activated the aura. Everyone's vision sharpened, and the skeleton mages suddenly gained artillery range, launching fireballs 3 kilometers across the lake. Undead died before approaching, while stray fireballs awakened the castle garrison. Chen Yang welcomed the response and ordered soldiers to hold the bridgehead while mages bombarded behind. Skeleton soldiers rushed forward, mages filled the sky with flame, and Chen Yang's EXP climbed continuously as level 2-8 undead warriors disappeared by the wave. His undead army kept expanding relentlessly. The slaughter eventually drew a furious roar. A massive swordsman stormed from the castle with undead knights, finally offering the battlefield something resembling a boss entrance. The captain recognized level 30 Baron Shiva, Amanli's husband, and began warning Chen Yang about him with the urgency of someone protecting valuable furniture. Progression was no longer remotely normal. Unfortunately for the Baron, the explanation lasted longer than his remaining life expectancy. Before the captain finished speaking, a miserable scream interrupted him. Baron Shiva crashed down with several bone spikes punched through his huge body. His dramatic arrival had lasted roughly as long as an unskippable advertisement. The level 30 Secret Realm boss awarded 282,000 EXP. The captain stared blankly, having watched a 1,000,000 HP monster die before completing its villain introduction. The boss barely received proper ceremony. Chen Yang sent Qin Sanjin to loot while riding toward the bridge. The corpse yielded a giant sword and purple ring, immediately restoring Sanjin's enthusiasm. Chen Yang kept the abyssal summoning ring, which increased summon speed 10%. He joked that even skeleton bathroom breaks would now require improved efficiency. Qin Sanjin stripped Baron Shiva with alarming thoroughness until Chen Yang stopped him. Their next appointment was with the deceased Baron's considerably more dangerous wife. Inside the castle waited Grand Mage Amanli, a seductive level 3-2 mage beside a Blood Wolf King and powerful guards. Her HP reached 4.57 million. Blood debts rarely stayed metaphorical here. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yurong stared at the elite lineup in disbelief. Several enemies rivaled Baron Shiva, while Amanli herself towered above them statistically. Stats had stopped resembling normal progression. Normal level 30 professionals dealt only a few thousand burst damage. Chen Yang kicked open the door anyway and demanded identification, like history's least qualified building inspector. Amanli barely had time to react before more than 100 giant fireballs crossed over Chen Yang's head toward the 2 million HP bosses. The boss barely received proper ceremony. Million-point damage numbers erupted everywhere. Amanli, the Blood Wolf King, and their elite guards collapsed so quickly that tactical analysis became unnecessary paperwork. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yurong almost pitied them. Amanli's death awarded 619,000 EXP, and completed the National Fortune Quest's first major objective. The quest had clearly escalated again. The system unlocked Fortune level. Chen Yang discovered upgrading F-rank replication required 1,000 Imperial Fortune contribution, an expensive price but hardly impossible anymore. While he considered future quests, Qin Sanjin spotted golden light among Amanli's remains and screamed that the mage appeared to have dropped legendary equipment. Nothing about this quest stayed simple. Chen Yang's attention snapped over immediately. Whatever philosophical detachment he possessed disappeared the instant golden loot entered the conversation, proving greed remained wonderfully universal. Equipment mattered less than raw scaling. Qin Sanjin recovered Amanli's magic beads, a legendary accessory with 8 bonus attributes and mood benefits, though its specialization made it temporarily useless to Chen Yang. They began returning when Yunyang City received a system-wide announcement. Grand Mage Amanli had fallen in 10 seconds. Predictably, public sanity suffered another setback. The system offered no balance patch. Professionals across the city erupted over Chen Yang's latest absurdity. Even Great Qin's older powerhouses concluded recruiting him had become a national-level priority. Rock led the group toward the Silver Knight's base, where alarmed voices announced that their commander had become trapped by an undead army elsewhere. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Nightfall Captain Rock requested entry and reported Amanli dead, Silver Moon Lake cleansed, and the Withered Pine Forest's forbidden undead zone destroyed. The Silver Knights reacted with disbelief until Rock pointed toward Chen Yang and swore he had personally watched the young mage accomplish everything described. Some victories still left scars behind. Vice Commander Ima studied Chen Yang skeptically. He responded by offering to rescue their commander and suggested she judge his strength afterward. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Ima accepted the challenge. The system immediately triggered Part 2, the rise and fall of the Eternal Kingdom, requiring a rescue and Blacklock City's purification. Sun Yurong noticed the rewards and looked at Chen Yang with renewed warmth. Powerful men apparently produced a remarkable increase in quest-related romantic lighting. Rewards usually meant larger problems afterward. Guided by the knights, they entered the Plague Plains. Ima warned Blacklock City contained undead soldiers alongside civilian zombies and demanded an actual rescue plan. Chen Yong calmly proposed killing their way straight inside. Ima nearly exploded, reminding him the city once held nearly 1 million residents plus soldiers. Urban regulations had officially lost control. 5 people charging that population sounded insane to her. Chen Yong's expression suggested he considered the number merely a mildly inconvenient traffic estimate. Rock urged Ima to trust him. Several zombies then emerged through the gray fog, offering Chen Yong an immediate and conveniently timed demonstration opportunity. The implication landed harder than expected. Before Ima finished, warning that one alert could summon countless undead, skeleton mages surfaced and fireballs reduced the nearby zombies to scorched corpses. Ima swallowed her remaining objections. Embarrassed, she suddenly claimed she had only wanted to warn Chen Yong about the strong wind and possible cold. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Chen Yong graciously agreed it felt chilly, then asked Sun Yurong to provide his skeleton brother's extra firepower. She activated Eagle Eye Aura immediately. The mages became long-range artillery again, saturating 3 kilometers with flame until even airborne mosquitoes would have required next-of-kin notification. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Under that bombardment, the group reached Blacklock City. Chen Yong still remained cautious. His nearly 7 million mana shield and 280 bodyguards justified the risk. The city would remember that moment. He asked Ima where Commander Ricky might be. She explained Ahmad experimented on citizens, making the slums Ricky's most likely rescue destination. That wound would not disappear quickly. Chen Yong prioritized finding Ricky for both quest and humanitarian reasons. At the slum entrance, Ima suddenly sensed the commander surrounded by undead knights. Riding forward, Chen Yong spotted heavily armored cavalry encircling a square. Their leader wore white armor and radiated unmistakable Death Knight boss pressure. Boss mechanics rarely survived his arrival. Level 30 Death Knight. William carried more than 10 million HP and 4 primary attributes above 1000. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yurong stared openly. Ima began explaining that this was only a minor boss compared with Grand Wizard Ahmad. She never finished the history lesson. Some victories still left scars behind. More than 100 fireballs arrived overhead. William, his horse, and surrounding cavalry died instantly, awarding Chen Yong 382,000 EXP before anyone drew breath. Arrival usually meant trouble followed shortly. Ima froze. The Silver Knights had failed to seriously wound William in a decade, yet Chen Yong deleted him like an unwanted calendar reminder. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Her attitude immediately softened into enthusiastic admiration. Qin Sanjin missed the transformation entirely because corpse looting remained his strongest extracurricular activity. Ima led them into a slum church packed with dark mages, where the trapped Silver Knights commander was still protecting civilians alone. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Ricky stood bloodied in ruined silver armor, shield and warhammer raised before more than a dozen civilians. The level 4-5 Holy Light Envoy looked boss tier himself. Even Chen Yong paused at Ricky's stats. Charging alone into Blacklock City suddenly looked less suicidal and more like an extremely aggressive rescue strategy. The human cost remained painfully obvious. The enemy leader demanded Ricky surrender, praising Imperial Preceptor Suen's undead eternity. Chen Yong frowned, wondering what kind of dramatic conspiracy he had entered. Ima identified the mage as Princess Lillian, Ricky's sister-in-law, who experimented on loved ones while trying to create perfect undead transformations and Death Knights. That wound would not disappear quickly. Chen Yong inspected the level 3-5 undead princess and sincerely admitted her numbers were impressive. Evil science, unfortunately, appeared to offer excellent statistical benefits. Her strength explained the kingdom's undead obsession. Before Chen Yong could examine more, Sun Yuerong suddenly shouted a warning from nearby. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. An ice blade shot straight toward Chen Yong before he could react, striking him directly as everyone watched in horror. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. The result read, no damage. His 6.95 to million mana shield and 695,000 magic defense made ordinary sub-level 100 magic about as threatening as harsh language. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Sun Yurong stared. Lillian stared harder. A powerful undead princess had landed a clean spell and accomplished precisely nothing except damaging her own confidence. Chen Yong took the attack personally anyway. Being technically fragile meant he disliked surprise spells, even when they bounced off like unpaid parking tickets. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Angry, he stomped. A colossal ivory-thick bone spike erupted beneath Lillian, punching through the princess and lifting her helplessly above the ruined floor. She ordered her subordinates to attack, so Chen Yong expanded Bone Spike Prison across 3.475 kilometers, skewering undead and wrecking buildings like supernatural urban renewal. Damage and EXP notifications poured across his vision. Sun Yuerong watched another impossible display while Blacklock City's nearby undead population rapidly reconsidered existing. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Restrained and unable to cast, Lillian demanded Chen Yong's identity and threatened the Great Rift Calamity Legion. Qin Sanjin arrived precisely in time for violence. Without hesitation, Qin Sanjin swung his purple greatsword directly into the immobilized princess's face, apparently choosing diplomacy's less paperwork-intensive cousin. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. After Sanjin rearranged Lillian's features, Chen Yang approached Commander Ricky with Mina's earring and asked whether the bloodied paladin recognized it. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Ricky's expression shattered when he saw his daughter's earring. Chen Yang explained Ahmad's involvement while the commander silently wept, gripping the keepsake tightly. Some victories still left scars behind. Though Ricky knew his homeland had fallen, Mina's confirmed fate broke him. Kneeling, he begged Chen Yang for help, completing another world advancement quest stage. Lillian suddenly laughed and revealed Mina was no longer in Blacklock City. Ricky's horror returned immediately as the princess clearly enjoyed every second. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. She explained Mina's body suited Ahmad's perfect contract vessel research. Chen Yang decided she had spoken enough and drove another bone spike through her mouth. Chen Yang ordered Qin Sanjin to carve Lillian slowly, not finish her quickly. The princess could still threaten him, proving villains treasured dramatic optimism even while skewered. He promised Ricky that Mina would be recovered and the undead calamity destroyed. The system answered with Mina's soul, an epic class quest targeting Grand Wizard Ahmad. Most professionals would have feared 3 epic quests appearing together. Chen Yang grinned instead, then ordered civilians evacuated before his coming purge accidentally included innocent survivors. He inspected the newly earned ancient staff, and red light nearly blinded him. Its monstrous bonuses looked less like equipment and more like a second cheat. 5 outrageous bonus attributes confirmed that impression. Then the sky darkened, and an enraged voice demanded to know who had killed the prince's wife. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. Lillian finally died for 392,380 EXP. Ricky warned that Prince Devon's Night Order would mobilize immediately, which Chen Yang received as convenient advance notice. He told Qin Sanjin to bring the enemy heads because they were visiting Devon's house. Meanwhile, Lillian's death sent Blacklock City's zombies into violent chaos. Chen Yang entered full farming mode, riding through the streets while casting, directing summons, and yelling loot locations like a necromancer, hosting the world's worst yard sale. Sun, Yuerong, and Qin Sanjin chased every blue or purple glow. Within half an hour, more than 70,000 zombies had died and Yuerong reached level 26. Their cheerful massacre ended when disciplined hoofbeats shook the streets. Ricky rode beside Chen Yang and identified the approaching formation as Prince Devon's Undead Night Order. A chained 10-meter frenzied giant appeared first, dragging an equally absurd cleaver. At level 35, it carried 15.75 million HP, an impressive intimidation value. Levels were becoming mere administrative details. Behind it marched dense undead knights and calamity warriors, including 2 death knights above 10 million HP. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yuerong stared again. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Ricky suggested retreating for Silver City reinforcements. Chen Yang refused, darkly claiming every approaching monster as his personal property and warning outsiders against stealing kills. Ricky could only stare. A Death Knight stepped forward to deliver Prince Devon's message, but Chen Yang had apparently declared speech as non-essential combat content. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Fireballs covered the sky before the night finished. Skeleton soldiers charged, and Chen Yang added Bone Spike Prison to the already criminally unfair engagement. The resulting battle resembled industrial demolition. Million-point damage numbers buried the screen while giants and elite undead collapsed faster than anyone could identify them. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Death Knights, Bayon and Tredden, each yielded 382,000 EXP. Enemies with tens of millions of HP became corpses before Qin Sanjin or Sun Yuerong attacked. Ricky jokingly denied responsibility for Chen Yang's army. Elsewhere, Prince Devon raged inside the military castle, blaming Ricky for Lillian's death and demanding revenge. Some victories still left scars behind. Ahmad reassured him that Ricky could help create a perfect contract vessel, allowing undead resurrection. Devon immediately brightened at the possibility of restoring Lillian. A cold voice interrupted from outside, telling Devon not to relax because resurrection would never happen. The Death Knights instantly reached for their weapons. The implication landed harder than expected. Ahmad remained composed as Silver Knights entered first, followed by Ricky and Emma. Chen Yang, Sun Yuerong, and Qin Sanjin came last, almost leisurely. Devon demanded answers about his missing officers. Qin Sanjin responded by dropping a bag containing Lillian's head and 3 Death Knight heads onto the floor. Devon instinctively looked toward Chen Yang. That was unfortunate timing. More than a dozen enormous fireballs were already crossing the hall directly toward him. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Prince Devon's 20 million HP vanished under consecutive million-point impacts. His death awarded 711,830 EXP, and finally made even Grand Wizard Ahmad visibly afraid. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Chen Yang still offered no introduction. One stomp split the floor, and a giant bone spike skewered level 40 Ahmad before Chen Yang calmly read his stats. Ahmad carried 25.75 million HP, and nearly 30 million mana. Realizing brute resistance was hopeless, he identified Chen Yang's group as professionals from another world. Ahmad confessed he had once been a professional himself and immediately begged for mercy, offering information in exchange for surviving Chen Yang's overwhelming control skill. Chen Yang demanded the truth about Ahmad's transformation and the Great Rift Dark Council. Ahmad explained that invasion destroyed the kingdom and turned it undead. The Dark Council, he claimed, sought a genuine method of becoming undead. Qin Sanjin immediately asked whether their research had actually succeeded. Ocean politics had become unexpectedly violent. Ahmad wanted a guarantee first. Chen Yang solemnly called himself honest and dependable, which nearly made Sun Yuerong laugh before Ahmad revealed corrupted holy light research. A perfect contract vessel required corrupted holy blood, explaining why Mina had been taken. Ahmad confirmed that holy light blood flowed naturally in the girl. Sun Yuerong worried Chen Yang intended to spare him despite the quest requirement. Chen Yang smiled confidently while Qin Sanjin unexpectedly led a horse inside. Ahmad assumed the horse was transportation for his release and thanked Chen Yang enthusiastically. Chen Yang slapped its rump, sent it galloping away, and announced mercy delivered. Ahmad froze. Qin Sanjin indignantly explained that Father Yang had indeed spared a horse. The wizard screamed because unfortunately, that horse had belonged to him. Furious beyond speech, Ahmad received worse news. Chen Yang asked Qin Sanjin to demonstrate his special heart sashimi, and Sanjin happily produced a skinning knife. Ahmad's begging changed nothing. Qin Sanjin approached with theatrical enthusiasm, while Chen Yang's earlier promise remained technically accurate in the most malicious possible interpretation. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Ahmad died for over 1 million EXP, completing both national fortune and world-class advancement quests. Chen Yang immediately used the advancement card he had risked everything obtaining. The result was a unique profession, King's Lich. Stored EXP exploded outward, carrying him straight to level 60 and instantly triggering his second advancement quest. Chen Yang stared at the new panel. King's Lich doubled advancement growth, raised every base attribute, improved his summons, and added another special talent. Talent scaling became increasingly absurd afterward. King's support granted 50% physical, magical, and true damage reduction while ignoring evasion and control immunity. Chen Yang considered the numbers almost disrespectfully excellent. King's Graveyard now summoned skeleton warriors and berserkers based on spirit. His supposedly trash F-rank replication talent was becoming history's most successful clerical error. That talent changed his options immediately. King's Magic Tower did the same for arcane soldiers and mages. Before Chen Yang even distributed new points, his overall combat force had multiplied several times. His celebrations stopped when a little girl in white ran through the hall shouting "Daddy," with an ecstatic Ricky chasing helplessly behind her. The silence carried more than words. Chen Yang sprinted over and kicked Ricky several meters away. The confused commander landed hard, asking why his supposed benefactor had suddenly attacked him. Chen Yang explained that holy light burned undead souls. Ricky's touch could disperse Mina entirely. The reunited daughter nodded vigorously, while her embarrassed father finally understood. Outside the secret realm, Academy and Legion recruiters gathered around the entrance. Then the system announced Ahmad's death, listing Chen Yang, Qin Sanjin, and Sun Yuerong. Great Qin professionals collectively lost their minds. Chen Yang had awakened only 2 days earlier and already reached level 60, something normal EXP mathematics considered offensive. Academy vice deans were equally stunned. Half a day had produced a national fortune stage, a world advancement, and 60 levels from an allegedly F-rank summoner. Great Qin's national fortune jumped 100 points, attracting international attention. Neighboring island professionals accused the empire of cheating because apparently irony enjoyed tourism. National politics shifted around his actions. Great Qin professionals answered with battlefield threats and mocked their neighbors' stagnant fortune. The shouting stopped quickly once the East Sea Front entered the conversation. Back in Blacklock City, Chen Yang helped loot Ahmad and learn Demon's Gaze, a passive causing every attack including summon damage to inflict debilitating weakness. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Qin Sanjin also found an epic jade accessory called Dark Guardian. Chen Yang's interest sharpened as soon as he read its powerful, defensive and control-breaking effects. Dark Guardian reduced incoming damage after control effects and could cleanse control while granting 3 seconds of invulnerability. Chen Yang equipped it without pretending to hesitate. Later, while resting, Chen Yang opened his attribute interface and discovered each click now added 5 spirit. Advancement had accelerated his cheat itself. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. Energized, he stayed awake through the night, adding roughly 2 million spirit in 10 hours. By the next afternoon, total spirit reached an absurd 2.8 million. Each of 4 skeleton types could now appear in groups exceeding 500, giving Chen Yang 2,264 bodyguards whose strongest attacks reached terrifying multi-million damage. Feeling overwhelmingly powerful, Chen Yang summoned Ricky and demanded directions to the royal capital. Ricky, Sun Yuerong, and the others immediately became nervous. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Tens of millions of civilian zombies surrounded the capital, more than 1 million undead soldiers waited inside, and an enormous shadow palace floated overhead. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Legends placed a level 60 undead commander within that fortress, far beyond Ahmad. Ricky carefully suggested that charging now might qualify as unnecessarily ambitious. That wound would not disappear quickly. Chen Yang threatened to leave the secret realm if nobody guided him. Ricky misunderstood completely, knelt immediately, and offered to support him as Eternal Kingdom's new king. The system responded by triggering the final national war quest, repel the Great Rift Dark Council and cleanse the royal capital. Chen Yang accepted instantly. 2 days later, their group reached mountains overlooking the capital, where black clouds smothered the skyline and distant undead roars rolled across dead plains. The silence carried more than words. Passing the valley gate, Chen Yang finally saw the scale firsthand. Dense zombie populations covered the surrounding plains, former residents strengthened by Su En's sacrifices. Even the weakest were level 35, with hundreds of thousands of HP. Sun Yurong looked worried. Chen Yang calmly said, large crowds favored him. Nobody nearby had prepared for this. He raised the ancient staff. Space tore apart beneath storm clouds, and a gigantic portal opened as a disciplined undead army marched into the world. Level 60 skeleton warriors possessed over 6 million HP, while berserkers traded defense for vicious offense. Chen Yang studied them with deeply inappropriate satisfaction. His undead army kept expanding relentlessly. Sun Yuerong, Qin Sanjin, and Ricky stared speechlessly. These skeletons wore varied armor and weapons, transforming Chen Yang's old summon group into a genuine army. Chen Yang raised the staff again. A second ice blue gate descended, decorated with mage statues and radiating another wave of overwhelming undead presence. Stats had stopped resembling normal progression. Arcane and fire skeleton mages emerged in different robes, male and female forms carrying varied staffs. The army now possessed range, variety, and deeply unfair numbers. Their weakest blizzard exceeded 1 million damage, while spirit-scaled meteor barrage could reach 15 million. Quantity and firepower together turned crowds into free EXP. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. The others finally understood Chen Yang's confidence. More than 2,000 level 60 summons could threaten entire battlefields. He ordered Sun Yurong to activate Eagle Eye. Qin Sanjin announced he had been ready to loot forever. Chen Yang nodded, pointed toward the capital, and gave the beautifully simple command, siege the city. Hundreds of berserkers became streaks of light, axes spinning through zombies, while ice and firestorms covered kilometers under Eagle Eye's expanded range. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Damage numbers became a blizzard, and EXP notifications followed immediately. Chen Yang told everyone to stop staring, then casually rode forward behind his apocalypse. Sun Yurong and Qin Sanjin rushed to loot. The army crossed the residential district toward King's Square, where the first meaningful boss finally appeared. The boss barely received proper ceremony. Undead High Priestess Sulia waited there, green-skinned and skeletal beneath black robes. At level 40, she carried 46.5 million HP and deserved cautious attention. Ricky identified her as the calamity's true culprit. Chen Yang questioned that, believing Imperial Preceptor Su En had caused the kingdom's destruction instead. The silence carried more than words. Ricky clarified that Su En lacked ritual expertise. Sulia had opened contact with the undead realm. The witch mocked their belief that the capital could be retaken. Chen Yang skipped conversation and sent hundreds of berserkers. Millions of damage landed, yet Sulia stopped at 13.95 million HP despite continued attacks. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. He immediately recognized a forced health phase mechanic. Seeing something survive, his opening attack made everyone tense, mostly because they had forgotten bosses could possess mechanics. Enraged, Sulia transformed into a massive bat, dramatically raising her stats and summoning over 100 smaller million HP bats around herself. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. A normal party might have panicked. Chen Yang snapped his fingers, fireballs arrived, and Sulia's second phase ended almost immediately for 1,349,897 EXP. Arrival usually meant trouble followed shortly. Her charred body collapsed. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yurong barely finished preparing for a long battle before Chen Yang sent them to strip the corpse. The exclusive drop was soul extraction, an active skill, marking targets within 500 meters and dealing true soul damage equal to 1,250% spirit. With current spirit, that meant roughly 35 million true damage. The 60-second cooldown felt acceptable when the alternative was politely allowing enemies to continue existing. They pushed deeper through wealthy city districts filled with elite patrols above, level 38. Million HP soldiers still collapsed beneath Chen Yang's skeleton army without meaningful resistance. Loot quality improved dramatically. Blue equipment appeared constantly, purple drops became common, and the undead capital began resembling a violently acquired luxury outlet mall. Equipment mattered less than raw scaling. Orange items occasionally joined the pile. Eventually, the group reached the royal gate, where a white armored rider emerged on a skeletal warhorse. Ricky identified level 4, 2 Dragon Knight Manrota, carrying nearly 50 million HP. Chen Yang immediately asked the obvious question, where exactly was the dragon? Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Ricky explained Manrota merely borrowed power from the Red Dragon Queen and was not allowed to ride her. Chen Yang's disappointment was almost personal. Skeleton berserkers leaped hundreds of meters and struck, but every physical attack displayed 0 damage. Manrota laughed, protected by temporary physical immunity from the queen. His celebration lasted seconds. Fireballs crashed down for over 14 million damage each, killing Manhwa and collapsing sections of the city wall around him. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Chen Yong mocked the knight for showing off before riding through the ruined gate. Black cavalry emerged immediately, led by several powerful knight lords. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. 3 undead grand mages stood among them, each a level 4-5 boss above 60 million HP. Chen Yong clenched one hand and activated soul extraction. His enemies discovered death had paperwork. 35 million true damage numbers floated upward. Cavalry collapsed together while their souls streamed as blue light into Chen Yong's king's space, stunning his companions. The system announced the city cleansed and revealed final bosses. Level 5-8 Su En, and level 5-5 Red Dragon Queen Alex. A dragon roar shook the palace. Alex emerged with 200 million HP and 50 million mana. Every Great Qin professional inside Eternal Kingdom received the same alarming world boss notification. Boss mechanics rarely survived his arrival. The palace gates opened again. Grand Imperial Preceptor Su En appeared beside her with 250 million HP, as Chen Yong's mages immediately prepared overwhelming bombardment. Spells struck first, yet immune appeared above Su En. Chen Yong assumed magic immunity and ordered skeleton berserkers to test physical damage instead. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. More than 500 berserkers leaped with axes raised. Su En remained smiling and calm, making Chen Yong suspect the irritating answer: physical immunity too. Chen Yong's suspicion proved correct. Another wave of immune notices floated above Su En, confirming physical attacks were equally useless and making the mechanic officially obnoxious. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yuerong panicked at complete damage immunity. Ricky urgently explained that Su En's protection came from a contract with Red Dragon Queen Alex. The same mechanic had protected Manhwa earlier. Ricky said the Red Dragon Queen must fall first, breaking Su En's contract before anyone could damage him. Chen Yong cheerfully called Alex a little red dragon and announced his intention to ride her, prompting immediate outrage, dragonfire, and Ricky's silent spiritual exhaustion. The incoming breath terrified everyone. Ricky prepared Holy Shield, but Chen Yong instead summoned more than 500 defensive skeleton warriors around the entire group. Every warrior activated shield walls simultaneously. Damage around 55,000 landed repeatedly, yet the overlapping formation prevented even a trace of dragonfire from penetrating. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Su En, Alex, and Ricky stared in disbelief. Calamity-level dragonfire had failed to breach Chen Yong's front line, while Qin Sanjin and Sun Yuerong finally breathed again. The attack would have instantly killed ordinary level 6-0 professionals without heavy mitigation. Chen Yong's warriors, however, reduced 80% damage and possessed enormous spirit-scale durability. Against normal enemies, Alex was terrifying. Against Chen Yong, she was transportation with attitude. He snapped his fingers, sending endless fireballs and ice spears upward. Alex's health plunged beyond halfway almost instantly. Screaming, the Red Dragon Queen crashed into the royal city, shaking streets while every nearby witness froze. The city suddenly felt much smaller. Thousands of outside professionals were sprinting toward the capital, hoping to share boss rewards. When dragonfire painted the sky red, their enthusiasm briefly encountered survival instincts. Zhao Tiju urged everyone faster, but Lu Ming stopped his group, convinced an attack that enormous had certainly roasted Chen Yong's entire party. Resistance looked increasingly theoretical from there. Ji Baxiao reminded Lu Ming that his wife was inside, making his pessimism sound suspiciously personal. Around them, every other professional had also stopped running. Academy geniuses and veteran professionals stared toward the blazing capital, terrified. Even from far away, the scale clearly exceeded anything sensible people should approach. School expectations had become hilariously outdated. Then, countless ice arrows and fireballs rose into the sky, instantly emptying Alex's health bar. Everyone reconsidered survival and resumed sprinting toward possible loot. Alex crashed outside the palace, her HP locking at 40 million for a second phase. Chen Yong grinned, informing her that mechanics would not prevent riding privileges. Furious, the dragon swung her tail. Chen Yong answered with soul extraction, ripping 35 million true damage away and collapsing her remaining resistance immediately. Death clearly did not end negotiations. Feeling her soul nearly torn free, Alex panicked and called him master. Everyone stared. Killing world bosses was one thing, bullying them into obedience was another. When Chen Yong asked why she deserved mercy, Alex offered herself as a mount. Su En erupted, furiously, reminding the Red Dragon Queen that he was her master. Su En warned Chen Yong not to interfere with Lord Claude's plan. Chen Yong glanced toward the floating fortress and casually insulted the undead creature inside. Alex's defeat removed the Red Dragon protection icon beneath Su En. Skeleton berserkers and mages attacked together, finally producing real damage across his enormous health bar. Su En died before finishing his shocked protest, awarding 2.75 million EXP. Chen Yong mocked the arrogant boss for lacking even a proper HP lock. Turning back to Alex, he demanded compensation. She spat out an ancient skill book called King's Contract and offered permanent service if he could understand it. King's contract allowed unlimited permanent contracts with king-type creatures. Relationship ranks range from obedience to enslavement, determined largely by the spirit difference between master and target. Chen Yang learned it immediately and targeted Alex. Invisible pressure flattened the dragon against the ground until the system confirmed a successful enslavement-level permanent contract. Green light erupted around Alex, raising her to level 60 and restoring every wound. Her attributes reached 10,000 each, with HP climbing to 250 million. The contract also granted Red Dragon Queen's protection, transferring all damage Chen Yang received onto Alex until she died. He laughed openly at the extra health bar. Alex shrank and stood obediently behind him. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yurong stared, realizing Chen Yang had converted a final world boss into personal equipment. Ricky looked equally stunned, though the practical result was obvious. The Eternal Kingdom had gained another terrifying ally while Chen Yang gained an extremely expensive mount. System rewards followed the final boss victory, including national fortune and large amounts of stored EXP. Chen Yang's progression continued accelerating well beyond normal expectations. The boss barely received proper ceremony. The restored Eternal Kingdom began recognizing Ricky and the surviving Silver Knights, while Chen Yang remained focused on whatever rewards might strengthen his next advancement. He inspected new drops, titles, and quest gains with growing satisfaction, treating the salvation of an entire fallen kingdom like a successful weekend farming session. Meanwhile, professionals outside discussed the unbelievable clear speed, world boss deaths, and exploding national fortune, increasingly convinced Chen Yang's F-rank label was cosmic fraud. Boss mechanics rarely survived his arrival. Academy representatives still wanted him desperately, but his earlier 2-month promise remained unchanged. Chen Yang intended to reach level 100 long before anyone could collect. The party prepared to enter the Shadow Fortress above the capital, where the Great Rift, Dark Council's deeper influence, remained hidden behind space-time level danger. Levels were becoming mere administrative details. Ricky warned that the fortress existed beyond ordinary Secret Realm rules. Chen Yang heard higher rewards, which was not exactly the emotional response Ricky had hoped for. With Alex now enslaved and his skeleton army expanded, Chen Yang entered the next area, accompanied by Qin Sanjin, Sun Yurong, and his growing undead entourage. The environment changed immediately. Space itself felt unstable, darkness pooled unnaturally across stone, and every distant sound suggested enemies operating on a different scale. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Even Chen Yang grew more cautious. His numbers were absurd, but Secret Realm mechanics had already proven that raw damage could occasionally meet something irritatingly immune. Alex explained that the Shadow Fortress belonged to space-time forces connected with the Great Rift Dark Council, making its inhabitants vastly stronger than ordinary Eternal Kingdom undead. Chen Yang accepted the warning without retreating. The second advancement quest still demanded a fallen Dark Lich, and every dangerous corridor smelled like useful progression. They entered deeper halls filled with undead elites and distorted creatures. Chen Yang's skeleton army advanced first, turning cautious exploration into extremely loud reconnaissance. His undead army kept expanding relentlessly. Ordinary space-time monsters possessed frightening statistics by local standards, but Chen Yang's spirit scaling remained equally unreasonable, allowing the army to keep pushing forward. That wound would not disappear quickly. Sun Yurong maintained eagle-eye aura whenever long-range bombardment helped. Qin Sanjin, meanwhile, treated every glowing corpse like a personal appointment he refused to miss. Their strange team rhythm became efficient. Chen Yang erased armies, Yurong extended range, Sanjin looted everything, and Alex absorbed any damage reckless enemies somehow delivered. The deeper they traveled, the more the fortress revealed traces of alien races and higher-dimensional beings, suggesting the Great Rift's reach extended far beyond one ruined kingdom. Chen Yang cared about the lore approximately until another valuable drop appeared. Then, ancient conspiracies moved temporarily behind equipment inspection in his personal priority queue. Eventually, the group entered a vast chamber where unusual elemental creatures appeared, stronger and faster than the previous undead defenders surrounding them. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Their attacks carried control effects and difficult movement patterns, finally forcing Chen Yang's skeleton formations to work instead of merely walking forward through resistance. Even so, overwhelming numbers solved most problems. Whenever formations became messy, Bone Spike, Prison, and Concentrated Magic restored order with the elegance of artillery. The silence carried more than words. A new presence finally approached, far more dangerous than common fortress creatures, moving with the speed and confidence of something accustomed to hunting professionals. The enemy was a beautiful elven ranger, a space-time class boss whose enormous HP and extreme agility immediately distinguished her from ordinary targets. Another boss discovered terrible timing today. She did not attack at once. Instead, she approached under unclear intentions, carrying the composed expression of someone expecting conversation rather than immediate cremation. Resistance looked increasingly theoretical from there. Chen Yang hesitated because his interface did not mark her hostile. After fighting thousands of monsters, an NPC wanting diplomacy felt almost suspiciously complicated. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. Alex recognized the elf's language and explained she was speaking peacefully. Chen Yang discovered dragons apparently came packaged with universal translation alongside fire and attitude. The Elven Ranger conveyed that Claude wished to meet Chen Yong and wanted to avoid bloodshed. That sounded reasonable enough to everyone except Chen Yong. He had entered the fortress to farm bosses, not attend diplomatic meetings. His response was essentially that anyone blocking progression should prepare for combat instead. Alex struggled to translate, "I'm here to farm bosses," into formal Elvish. Chen Yong simplified the message helpfully, "Attack her." Another boss discovered terrible timing today. The Red Dragon Queen obeyed immediately, breathing fire across the elf. The attack dealt limited damage but burned away her golden hair and pale appearance spectacularly. Chen Yong's mouth twitched. He had wanted hostility established, not a salon disaster, though the result certainly eliminated ambiguity regarding peaceful negotiations. No joke could soften that truth. Qin Sanjin enthusiastically stepped forward with his sword. Chen Yong kicked him behind the shield wall before Sanjin could volunteer for another catastrophically unnecessary duel. Skeleton troops attacked, but the ranger blurred hundreds of meters away instantly. Chen Yong stared, accusing the boss of cheating with admirable lack of self-awareness. Sun Yuerong identified the technique as evasive dash, allowing continuous rapid dodges for 15 seconds with distance scaling from the ranger's extraordinary agility. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. More than 1,000 spells filled the chamber, yet the elf slipped between every fireball and ice spear. Not one projectile managed to touch her. Skeleton berserkers could sprint and leap at monstrous speeds, but they could not teleport. Worse, the ranger summoned elementals while kiting them around effortlessly. The skeleton ranks answered without hesitation. Those summons inflicted slows and casting interruptions, turning Chen Yong's terrifying army into frustrated pursuers. The space-time's secret realm finally looked appropriately unfair. Chen Yong waited rather than wasting more spells. When the 15-second evasion ended, he locked onto the ranger's soul and activated soul extraction. Death clearly did not end negotiations. The attack now dealt over 100 million true damage, shocking Sun Yuerong. Chen Yong's numbers had tripled so quickly that conventional benchmarking had surrendered. A legendary necklace effect triggered fear for 5 seconds. The ranger froze, and more than 500 berserkers instantly surrounded her with enthusiastic axes. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Her remaining health crashed toward 180 million before locking again. Crimson energy erupted from her body as surrounding elemental pets enlarged dramatically. Sun Yuerong recognized Beast Frenzy, granting temporary damage immunity, 0 skill cooldowns, and duration scaling with agility. Chen Yong responded with weaponized patience. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. He ordered skeleton warriors to rotate taunt continuously, forcing the empowered ranger to waste her entire invulnerable phase attacking durable defensive summons. When Beast Frenzy ended, every berserker and mage attacked together. Level 60 Spacetime Forest Ranger Kobuseni finally died, awarding more than 5 million EXP. Resistance looked increasingly theoretical from there. Sun Yuerong admitted a normal party would have suffered catastrophic losses. Chen Yong and Qin Sanjin were already kneeling beside the corpse discussing loot instead. Qin Sanjin recovered an ancient ranger dress. Chen Yong immediately offered it to Sun Yuerong, who refused because its value exceeded anything she expected from tagging along. She understood that space-time, ancient equipment could be priceless compared with normal level 60 gear. Accepting casually might make her look greedy despite their growing relationship. Chen Yong insisted and placed the dress in her hands, calling it a gift that would spare her years of detours. Sun Yuerong nearly cried. The equipment might remain useful for her entire career, because another space-time secret realm opportunity could never come. Her gratitude toward Chen Yong deepened considerably. Loot remained useful despite the chaos. As they moved onward, Chen Yong glanced back at Kobuseni and considered contracting her. A space-time ranger with ridiculous mobility would be useful and entertaining. Alex immediately explained the problem. Kobuseni was not a king-type creature, so King's contract could not preserve or enslave her after ordinary death. The implication landed harder than expected. Chen Yong asked why Alex qualified. She explained king creatures required preserved soul and self-awareness through sacrificial transformation, something most races could not survive. Souls made every victory more complicated. Alex had succeeded only because of superior dragon blood. Other races usually preserved either power or consciousness, not both, making unlimited king recruiting difficult. Blood magic always complicated the arithmetic. Chen Yong sighed over the lost army idea. Alex brightened and suggested learning the king's sacrificial ritual, then hunting higher races capable of surviving transformation. That possibility immediately restored his enthusiasm. An unlimited king army sounded less like a build and more like an extinction event waiting for adequate recruitment. Alex solemnly promised never to deceive him because both body and soul belonged to her master. Sun Yuerong listened nearby, quietly questioning reality's design team. Chen Yong imagined billions of contracted kings. At that scale, boss mechanics would become irrelevant because his army itself would qualify as the mechanic. Another boss discovered terrible timing today. He continued, leading the group deeper, followed by Qin Sanjin, Alex, revived undead, and the massive skeleton forces filling the fortress corridors behind them. They eventually reached a central plaza containing a solitary black throne. A hooded man sat there, his body strangely translucent like a projection. The implication landed harder than expected. The system identified him as Undead Grand Wizard Claude, spacetime level 60. carrying 800 million HP and 400 million mana. Claude's attributes exceeded 30,000, and his skill list included Shadow Sword, Darkness, Silence, Spirit Devour, and Mind Corrosion. Hardly beginner-friendly entertainment, his numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. More troubling was the description. Claude was merely an avatar of Baron Claude, a mid-ranking member of the Great Rift Dark Council's undead empire. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Qin Sanjin and Sun Yuerong struggled with the implication. If an avatar possessed those numbers, the true body existed somewhere far beyond their understanding. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Claude greeted them with amusement and casually mentioned Great Qin's ancestor Qin Zulong and Grand Marshal Yu Zhongwu as previous visitors to the Shadow Fortress. Qin Sanjin reacted immediately, demanding how a foreign undead wizard could possibly know two legendary figures whose names defined Great Qin's history. The Empire gained another strategic advantage. Claude answered simply, he had fought them before. Chen Yang's expression tightened because historical records placed Qin Zulong at level 2,579 long ago. If Claude spoke truthfully, his real body likely approached level 2,500 or, at minimum, belonged to a tier capable of surviving contact with such monsters. Progression was no longer remotely normal. That made mid-ranking Dark Council member deeply uncomfortable wording. Chen Yang realized the Great Rift contained hidden bosses stacked behind hidden bosses like malicious nesting dolls. Claude claimed both Qin Zulong and Yu Zhongwu had lost to him. Qin Sanjin immediately erupted, treating criticism of Great Qin's founding ancestor as personal blasphemy. Sun Yuerong joined the outrage, insisting the Empire's eternal emperor could never lose. Their patriotic anger filled the chamber while Claude remained irritatingly amused. The implication landed harder than expected. Chen Yang, less emotionally invested in historical pride, watched Claude carefully instead. Whether the boast was true mattered less than surviving whatever this avatar planned next. Sun Yuerong's protest enraged Claude. He flicked a purple-black shadow sword toward her, and the level 5/9 ranger froze, certain the space-time spell would kill her instantly. Chen Yang appeared in front of her and slapped the shadow sword apart barehanded. Everyone stared, especially Alex, because transferred damage should have struck her. Alex lost exactly 1 HP, the system's forced minimum. Claude demanded how Chen Yang had negated dark magic. Chen Yang answered simply that Claude was too weak. He snapped his fingers. Skeleton berserkers leaped forward, carving tens of millions from Claude until the avatar hit a second-phase lock and summoned 18 blue portals. Undead poured through while Claude began casting Mind Corrosion. Chen Yang answered with Bones Spike Prison, splitting the floor beneath the Grand Wizard before casting finished. A thigh-thick spike launched Claude upward. Before his scream settled, fireballs and ice spears slammed into him, rapidly shredding another enormous section of HP. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Claude's health stopped again at 80 million, signaling a third phase. Instead of fighting, he opened a space-time portal and threatened revenge during their next meeting. Chen Yang refused to schedule one. Soul Extraction dealt 105 million true damage, killing Claude and clearing Fallen Eternal Kingdom after 95 hours of fighting. The settlement listed Chen Yang, Qin Sanjin, and Sun Yuerong, awarding EXP, Epic Equipment, 150 Fortune Contribution, and another 150 Imperial Fortune nationally. Loot remained useful despite the chaos. Then a 10-minute collapse warning appeared. The fortress immediately shook apart, so Chen Yang abandoned celebration and ordered everyone to strip Claude before evacuation. Alex transformed for transport while Sun Yuerong discovered a golden Berserker advancement card on Claude. Chen Yang instantly told her to give it to Qin Sanjin. Yuerong reminded him the card was legendary. Chen Yang cared only that it matched Sanjin's class and that the collapsing fortress strongly discouraged prolonged appraisal sessions. Qin Sanjin accepted the priceless card with worship approaching genuine filial devotion. After Claude was thoroughly looted, Chen Yang mounted, Alex and Yuerong followed behind. When Sanjin tried climbing aboard, Alex grabbed him in one claw instead. Apparently Chen Yang could ride the dragon. Everybody else needed alternative seating arrangements. Yuerong quietly feared their closeness would end outside the realm. Chen Yang's growth already pointed toward heights she might never reach or even meaningfully follow. Outside, several days of traffic had transformed the Eternal Kingdom entrance into a small marketplace filled with professionals, barbecue stalls, milk tea, noodles, and recruiters. 4 Academy vice deans sat nearby drinking absurdly cheap lemon water while arguing over Chen Yang. Everyone had become accustomed to their increasingly undignified competition. The system suddenly announced the world's secret realm cleared, revealing the 3 participants and adding projected normal, difficult, and heroic dungeons based on their route. The entrance exploded in disbelief. A mystery unsolved for thousands of years had fallen in under 4 days, and Chen Yang's name instantly became historical material. Fans declared lifelong loyalty, changed surnames, and joked about rewriting family genealogies. After multiple miracles, nobody could dismiss Chen Yang as merely lucky anymore. Family history had become battlefield ammunition. The vice deans were equally stunned. They had expected the final quest to defeat him, forcing him toward Academy support. Instead, he conquered everything personally. Zheng Zhaoxi realized coercion was becoming dangerous. Chen Yang already fought near second advancement strength, and his leveling speed suggested that advantage would disappear frighteningly soon. Ordered by Qin Tianyi to recruit Chen Yang regardless, Zheng chose the safest bureaucratic tactic, called his boss, and returned the impossible problem upstairs. Another boss discovered terrible timing today. Elsewhere in Yuzhou, powerful commanders discussed ending the East Sea battlefield. Qin Tianyi proposed using the Qin clan's ancestral king's sword to break level 100 restrictions. The other commanders reacted cautiously because the king's sword was a national treasure. Qin Tianyi nevertheless treated deploying it as acceptable if victory required overwhelming force. Their strategic discussions soon shifted toward Chen Yang, whose impossible secret realm clear had reached every major power center and complicated existing recruitment plans considerably. The implication landed harder than expected. Reports confirmed he had advanced to King's Lich, reached level 60, raised national fortune, and acquired strength no ordinary newly awakened professional should possess. His level curve kept breaking expectations. Qin Tianyi's interest contained something darker than recruitment. Around him, politics, clan interests, and personal calculations began turning Chen Yang's rapid rise into a genuine threat. Meanwhile, Chen Yang and his companions emerged safely before Shadow Fortress collapsed. Waiting crowds immediately surged forward, turning the entrance into controlled chaos within seconds. Recruiters shouted offers, admirers called his name, and professionals tried photographing him. Chen Yang discovered fame was simply another dungeon mechanic with worse crowd control. Academy representatives pushed through first, eager to renew their offers. Chen Yang reminded them that his 2-month agreement remained active and showed no intention of surrendering. Qin Sanjin proudly displayed his golden advancement card to anyone who looked interested, behaving like a lottery winner whose ticket had personally adopted him. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Sun Yurong stayed quieter, still wearing gratitude and complicated attachment. The ancient ranger equipment Chen Yang gave her represented resources she could never acquire independently. Chen Yang returned to practical matters, checking rewards and preparing for future advancement. With enormous stored EXP, level 60 had become a temporary ceiling rather than destination. His new profession and equipment had also strengthened soul extraction drastically, meaning enemies below higher advancement thresholds could potentially disappear before finishing introductions. Souls made every victory more complicated. He continued adding spirit whenever possible. Every click now contributed 5 points, making his billion-point cheat accelerate instead of becoming slower as progression advanced. News organizations and military academies dissected his record endlessly. The more experts calculated, the less reasonable his public F-rank talent appeared to anyone with functioning arithmetic. Great Qin's higher leadership could not ignore the 150-point fortune gain either. National fortune changes affected strategic strength, making Chen Yang valuable beyond personal combat power. At the same time, international observers monitored Great Qin nervously. One new professional had already shifted statistics that powerful nations normally changed through wars or centuries. Chen Yang remained largely uninterested in geopolitical panic. He wanted his next advancement, better skills, stronger summons, and enough freedom to keep farming dangerous secret realms. His return soon drew invitations from major legions. Several commanders wanted a personal meeting, each convinced sufficient resources could persuade the young monster into their organization. Chen Yang accepted the meeting mostly from curiosity. If powerful people intended to bid for him, hearing their offers cost nothing except time and possibly patience. Before entering, he reviewed his summons and newly obtained king creatures. Alex remained especially useful because permanent damage transfer gave him an enormous second health pool. His king's contract also opened possibilities beyond ordinary summoning. Every qualifying creature could become permanent military strength instead of temporary skill-generated manpower. Another enemy became experienced remarkably quickly. That prospect mattered more to Chen Yang than academy lectures. He already possessed a progression engine. What he needed was access to increasingly powerful targets and worlds. The meeting location was heavily guarded, reflecting the status of the commanders inside. Lu Qijun and several familiar academy representatives escorted Chen Yang upstairs personally. Before entering, Chen Yang's newer summon, the Night Ranger, quietly detected hostility above them, proving one of her passive abilities could identify murderous intent within tracking range. That information immediately changed his mood. A recruitment meeting was one thing. Walking knowingly into a room containing an enemy required rather more careful insurance. Chen Yang asked the Night Ranger whether she was certain. She confirmed that prey tracking detected any hostility directed toward her master within its enormous effective range. Delighted, he called her a treasure and ordered her to remain outside permanently instead of returning to the undead world between ordinary summoning periods. Another world meant another dangerous opportunity. The Night Ranger accepted, then calmly asked whether she should kill the hostile person upstairs. Chen Yang nearly choked at the confidence behind that question. Whoever waited above was likely a Legion commander, meaning 4th advancement or higher. Normal level suppression should make Chen Yang's current attacks ineffective against such monsters. Yet the Night Ranger insisted she could kill the target because she inherited Chen Yang's bonus attributes and possessed a fully charged skill ignoring level restrictions. Chen Yang reopened her panel and finally read Precision Shot carefully. Charging 5 to 50 seconds increased range and damage enormously, with full charge guaranteeing an absolute hit. With current bonuses, a fully charged arrow could reach hundreds of millions in damage from roughly 20 kilometers away. Chen Yang suddenly respected reading skill descriptions. He ordered the Night Ranger to wait somewhere outside for instructions. She vanished instantly, leaving the escorts confused about where his beautiful summon had disappeared. Chen Yong casually claimed her duration had expired and suggested bringing summons before commanders might seem rude. Nobody considered assassination remotely plausible from a level 60 rookie. Upstairs waited 4 famous commanders: Xiao Wenyuan of Shengjing, Liu Weiguo of Yingtian, Huang Yongguang of Dongdu, and Qin clan head Qin Tianyi. The implication landed harder than expected. Chen Yong immediately noticed the Night Ranger's passive hostile mark floating over Qin Tianyi. The commander's name looked neutral, but hidden intent told another story. Chen Yong wondered whether the hostility came from rejecting Qin Bing somehow, though he had never even formally refused Yuzhou Legion membership before this meeting. Qin Tianyi opened negotiations by announcing approval for Chen Yong to marry Qin Bing and enter the Qin clan, apparently skipping several socially traditional intermediate steps. Chen Yong stared at him and asked when he had ever requested marriage. Being assigned a wife and clan simultaneously felt less romantic than administrative kidnapping. Xiao Wenyuan immediately criticized Qin Tianyi's shamelessness. Liu Weiguo noted every commander had attractive daughters, while Huang Yongguang proposed simply comparing offers openly. That wound would not disappear quickly. Qin Tianyi promised elite cultivation resources for marriage and Yuzhou membership. Rival commanders countered with 4th advancement support, war merit privileges, and competing benefits. Xiao Wenyuan finally revealed his trump card, an ancient 4th advancement undead ancient dragon summoning skill, considered among the strongest known undead summoner skills. Mercy was never part of this. The room reacted strongly, but Chen Yong merely inspected his fingernails. People were holding an auction and had somehow forgotten to consult the item being auctioned. When he pointed that out, Zhang Zhaoxi mocked him for overestimating himself, claiming Legion commanders had no reason to care about his personal opinion. That wound would not disappear quickly. Chen Yong calmly asked why they had invited him at all. Before Zhang could escalate further, Qin Tianyi requested Chen Yong state his position directly. Chen Yong answered by pulling a huge hammer from his inventory and dropping it onto the table. Everyone initially looked confused until the equipment panel appeared. Hammer of Destruction was level 60 space-time legendary equipment, granting 8,000 strength, thousands of other attributes, and enormous percentage bonuses across offense and defense. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. It also increased health, mana, defenses, attack speed, skill damage, critical damage, reduced enemy armor and movement, and generated shields from damage dealt. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. The room fell silent. The weapon's raw statistics rivaled much higher-level Secret Realm gear, while its 8 additional effects made several seasoned professionals visibly jealous. That wound would not disappear quickly. Chen Yong's dagger was space-time legendary too. Suddenly promises of best cultivation resources sounded less impressive beside loot he had already earned himself. Equipment, skills, consumables, and advancement resources were exactly what Legions normally offered. Chen Yong could obtain superior versions by clearing space-time content directly. Recruitment had become its own battlefield. He called the hammer his answer and stood to leave while Alex casually retrieved it. None of the commanders could honestly promise anything more attractive. Legally, they also could not force him. Professional system legions possessed equal organizational status regardless of size, making Sanjin Legion technically comparable to their ancient institutions. Only a Legion war could compel submission, and launching one against a rookie would attract higher authorities immediately. The commanders therefore faced inconvenient legal reality. Qin Tianyi stopped Chen Yong anyway and offered a final suggestion. He was still weak, and should join Yuzhou Legion for protection immediately. The Legion hierarchy suddenly looked fragile. Then Qin Tianyi released crushing pressure directly at him. The other commanders moved to intervene, knowing the level gap could normally cripple a young professional instantly. Alex stepped forward first. Dragon might erupted from her and shattered Qin Tianyi's pressure, revealing that Chen Yong's contracted woman possessed powerful high-grade dragon blood. The room froze. Chen Yong watched Qin Tianyi's name turn yellow and HP become visible, level 200, spear-type profession, with more than 17 million health. Chen Yong rejected the suggestion outright. Qin Tianyi, meanwhile, studied his level 60 statistics and realized the young man already possessed nearly 1 million HP personally. Alex's 250 million HP made matters worse. Qin Tianyi finally understood how Chen Yong had conquered Eternal Kingdom, despite awakening only days earlier. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Unfortunately, admiration did not replace hostility. Qin Tianyi concluded that a talent already offended could not safely be allowed to mature into something uncontrollable. The Night Ranger's passive mark immediately transmitted that killing intent. Chen Yong understood the decision forming behind Qin Tianyi's calm expression before anyone else noticed. Rather than wait for an enemy to choose timing, Chen Yong decided first strike logic was perfectly acceptable when the opponent had already emotionally signed the murder paperwork. Outside, the Night Ranger sensed her master's intention from kilometers away. Her bow rose slowly as dark energy gathered into a devastating precision shot. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. The hidden charge continued while Chen Yong remained apparently relaxed upstairs. Every second increased the arrow's range and damage toward its guaranteed hit maximum. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Qin Tianyi still believed level suppression and authority protected him. He had no idea someone outside could ignore those assumptions entirely once fully charged. The other commanders sensed tension, but not the exact threat. Xiao Wenyuan watched both men carefully, understanding that one wrong move might transform recruitment into catastrophe. Chen Yong's calm expression remained unchanged. The hostile mark above Qin Tianyi, however, ensured every murderous fluctuation stayed perfectly visible to him. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. What had begun as a bidding meeting, now balanced on a knife edge between powerful institutions, one rapidly rising professional, and an unseen ranger drawing death outside. Lu Qijun and the vice deans exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody expected the famous Legion commanders to compete so aggressively over someone awakened less than a week. Chen Yong considered his options. He did not fear organizations automatically, but he strongly disliked anyone assuming his future, marriage, allegiance, or survival belonged to them. Qin Tianyi's coercion crossed that boundary completely. Whatever political reason motivated him mattered less now than the simple fact that genuine killing intent existed. No joke could soften that truth. Before the confrontation could erupt, another powerful presence approached the building. The pressure changed abruptly, causing several senior professionals to look toward the entrance. A wooden door appeared unexpectedly in empty space and opened with impossible calm, announcing the arrival of someone whose authority exceeded normal Legion politics. Recruitment had become its own battlefield. Yui Hongyi stepped through wearing a red shipao and crimson cloak, accompanied by 3 fingers, 5 ghosts, and 7 rakshasas, all radiating terrifying pressure. Xiao Wenyuan and the others immediately greeted Marshal Yu, while several vice deans dropped to one knee. Qin Tianyi reluctantly withdrew his threatening aura. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Yu Hongyi's formal appearance meant she had effectively resumed her former national decision-making authority, leaving even Qin Tianyi unable to continue coercing Chen Yong openly. 2 kilometers away, the Night Ranger had already finished charging her killing shot when Yue Hongyi's arrival interrupted Chen Yong's order and saved Qin Tianyi unknowingly. Yue Hongyi's crimson-cloaked entourage radiated terrifying authority. Senior officers greeted Marshal Yue immediately, while vice deans knelt and Qin Tianyi finally stopped pressing Chen Yong. Her formal appearance represented former national authority, not merely personal influence. She reminded every commander that Chen Yong's decision would wait until their agreed 2-month deadline. Nobody dared object. Chen Yong silently told the Night Ranger to release her shot, while Qin Tianyi wiped unexplained sweat after narrowly escaping death he never saw. Once others dispersed, Qin Tianyi demanded whether Yu Hongyi had chosen Chen Yong over him. She corrected him quietly. The decision belonged to their entire group. Yui Hongyi explained they had invested heavily in Qin Tianyi and offered repeated chances, only to watch him squander them. Their confidence had finally shifted elsewhere. Later, in a quiet pavilion, Chen Yong rested with his head on Alex's lap while the dragon awkwardly massaged his temples. Yu Hongyi studied him amusedly. She admitted their wager now looked unwinnable. Chen Yong teasingly argued he was only level 60 with more than a month remaining, earning an eye roll. When Yue Hongyi joked about him marrying into the Qin clan if she won, Chen Yong refused instantly. Qin Tianyi already wanted him dead, which complicated romance. Yu Hongyi asked about the space-time's secret realm. She confessed that merely seeing 1 year earlier had terrified her so deeply that the trauma remained physical. Chen Yong struggled to imagine someone powerful enough to silence commanders being frightened senseless, but Yue Hongyi explained that extreme despair could scar even experts. She finally asked whether he had encountered Claude. Chen Yong casually replied that he had killed Claude, then quickly clarified it was merely an avatar. Mercy was never part of this. Yu Hongyi's disappointment revealed something personal. Claude was not just an enemy, he was connected directly to the disappearance of her father centuries earlier. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Her father was Yue Zhongwu, one of Great Qin's 5 Grand Marshals. Chen Yong noted Claude claimed victory, never death, meaning Yue Zhongwu might still live. Hope shattered Yue Hongyi's composure. She leaned close urgently, accidentally giving Chen Yong an indecent view until he reminded the legendary expert to preserve her image. After retreating with embarrassment, Yue Hongyi asked again whether Claude had mentioned killing her father. Chen Yong assured her the boastful undead certainly would have bragged. She began requesting help, but Chen Yong agreed before she finished. Anyone who once sacrificed marriage prospects to save her father clearly needed only one favor. He added one condition. He would help if reasonably possible, but not throw away his life. Yu Hongyi accepted immediately because desperation did not justify demanding suicide. Asked whether she could repay him, Chen Yong claimed nothing came to mind, then requested she cross her legs differently and bounce them, proving maturity remained optional. Yu Hongyi called him awful, but humored the request before giving him a summoning talisman capable of bringing her instantly after 5 seconds of burning. Chen Yong naturally asked whether it worked during baths. Yu Hongyi said yes, immediately giving him terrible ideas before leaving through another impossible wooden door. Far away, Qin Tianyi had watched the pavilion through a telescope and misunderstood everything spectacularly. Furious, he ordered most second advancement secret realms sealed against Chen Yong. Only the East Sea secret realm would remain available, with assassins arranged inside. Qin Tianyi also ordered Qin Sanjin captured so 5 sealed legendary talents could be extracted. His deeper ambition was monstrous: accumulate 20 legendary talents, surpass everyone, and eventually force Yu Hongyi to regret abandoning confidence in him. The silence carried more than words. Chen Yong, still resting in the pavilion, already knew hostility remained nearby because the Night Ranger's tracking ability continued marking dangerous intentions around him. Instead of rushing into retaliation, he prepared for the next advancement stage. Reaching new realms mattered more than winning every political argument immediately. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. The second advancement path pointed toward the East Sea, now suspiciously the only accessible option. Chen Yong recognized coincidence when it arrived wearing clown makeup. Qin Sanjin remained useful, loyal, and blissfully unaware that powerful people viewed the legendary talents sealed inside him as harvestable resources rather than personal gifts. Chen Yong's own resources continued growing as stored EXP accumulated. His main limitation was advancement, not leveling speed, making every new quest potentially explosive progression. When departure preparations began, he summoned the Night Ranger again and reviewed her extreme tracking radius, precision damage, and ability to ignore ordinary level suppression. The summon's combat potential made conventional bodyguards unnecessary. She could identify hostility before enemies approached and kill distant threats before they knew detection occurred. That outcome arrived faster than expected. Alex remained his second defensive layer, transferring damage onto herself. Together, Dragon Protection and Night Ranger Surveillance made surprising Chen Yong increasingly difficult. The route eventually led him toward the East Sea Secret Realm, a massive world containing competing factions, abyss undead forces, and advancement opportunities for young professionals. Chen Yong entered with familiar confidence, while Qin Tianyi's hidden arrangements ensured the trip involved more than simple monster farming from the very beginning. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. The Sea Kingdom differed dramatically from Eternal Kingdom. Vast gray oceans dominated the landscape. Scattered islands served factions, and warships carried professionals between dangerous zones. The world's faction system separated civilians, kingdoms, abyss forces, and foreign professionals. Chen Yong cared mostly about which groups counted as legitimate hostile targets. The system offered no balance patch. He soon met Liu Ergu, another great Qin professional whose survival instincts improved rapidly after realizing the newcomer beside him was the famous god Yong. Liu Ergu became an enthusiastic guide, explaining faction rules, local dangers, and advancement opportunities, while Chen Yong evaluated the realm like a gigantic EXP menu. Chen Yong's second advancement required killing a fallen Dark Lich, making Abyss-held waters the obvious hunting ground despite warnings about boss-level undead fleets. The boss barely received proper ceremony. News of his arrival spread quickly among great Qin professionals. Some wanted to meet the legendary rookie, others simply wanted to watch whatever impossible incident followed. Chen Yong was less interested in an audience than targets. With the Night Ranger scouting enormous distances, searching dangerous waters became dramatically easier than ordinary exploration. Her senses eventually located Abyss undead warships offshore. Chen Yong immediately treated the information as a quest marker written in the universal language of free EXP. Liu Ergu discovered that traveling with Chen Yong meant normal threat calculations stopped functioning. Enemy ships labeled dangerous by veterans became farming locations within minutes. The Night Ranger's first serious shot demonstrated why. From enormous range, she charged precision shot against a level 6-0 Dark Lich leading the Abyss fleet. Progression was no longer remotely normal. The arrow crossed the sea like black lightning, piercing the Lich with over 1 billion damage and nailing the Secret Realm boss directly onto its own railing. Chen Yong barely reacted. Liu Ergo reacted enough for both of them. Level 6-0 bosses were supposed to require raids, not become long-distance archery demonstrations. Boss mechanics rarely survived his arrival. The Dark Lich's death advanced Chen Yong's quest and drew attention from nearby Great Qin naval forces, who had been considering retreat from the same fleet. Chen Yong summoned Alex in full dragon form and moved toward the Abyss ships. The Red Dragon Queen's arrival transformed an already strange battlefield into mythology. Dragon flames swept across the ocean, breaking fortified warships that ordinary teams needed concentrated attacks to sink. Liu Ergo's EXP immediately surged from shared kills. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. Great Qin officers, watching from a nearby ship, struggled to understand the damage. They had expected a raid battle. Instead, a dragon was casually deleting enemy vessels. Among them were Qin Bing and Su Chacha, both participating in advancement-related operations. Su Chacha had already become an enthusiastic supporter of Chen Yong's reputation. Deputy Commander Xiao Chen initially doubted the endless stories surrounding God Yong. Watching an Abyss boss receive a billion damage arrow corrected that skepticism efficiently. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Alex's Dragon Flame then shattered another ship, reinforcing the lesson. Whatever rumors described Chen Yong's strength had apparently suffered from insufficient exaggeration rather than excess. No joke could soften that truth. Liu Ergo benefited shamelessly from the massacre, gaining levels almost passively. For him, being carried by Chen Yong felt like discovering that hard work was negotiable. Chen Yong, naturally, complained the EXP was slow. His path of the evil god progress required 100,000 enemies, making small fleets inefficient despite spectacular destruction. Liu Ergu nearly suffered emotional damage hearing millions of EXP called slow. Chen Yang simply asked the Night Ranger to locate denser concentrations of hostile monsters. Her perception spread beyond 1,000 kilometers, mapping threats across the sea. She first found a port containing nearly 10 million potential targets westward. The sea carried consequences in silence. Liu Ergu panicked and explained that East Seaport belonged to the civilian faction. Chen Yang immediately revised instructions, excluding human-like allied settlements from future searches. The Night Ranger tried again and located a massive abyss stronghold 308 kilometers east, containing several million enemies, finally a number Chen Yang considered respectable. Alex transformed for travel. Chen Yang told Liu Ergo he could not safely accompany them into deep abyss territory, and Ergo reluctantly accepted, losing his premium carry service. Chen Yang mounted the dragon with the Night Ranger, then disappeared into the sky. Liu Ergo watched with the sadness of a customer seeing unlimited free shipping discontinued. He finally understood Sun Yuerong's attachment. If Liu Ergu had possessed comparable beauty, he privately suspected he might have reconsidered several personal boundaries for that leveling speed. Flying over the East Sea, Chen Yang soon noticed a large island protected by black mist and lightning, resembling formations commonly associated with Japanese Onmyoji forces. Before approaching, the Night Ranger detected a merchant vessel 20 kilometers away. Chen Yang redirected Alex, deciding the unexpected ship deserved investigation first. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. The deck was covered with brutally murdered civilians. Male victims were mutilated, while women had been stripped and displayed deliberately, transforming Chen Yang's curiosity into cold rage. A black vortex appeared above him as wandering souls gathered from the corpses, quietly requesting entrance into King's space rather than dispersing around the sea. Chen Yang hesitated because absorbing innocent souls felt different from consuming monster spirits. When they bowed gratefully before entering, his assumptions began to change. His enemies discovered death had paperwork. He wondered whether King's space might actually shelter souls instead of imprisoning them. Alex then sensed a higher life form somewhere inside the vessel's cabin. Chen Yang followed her downstairs and found a large glass tank containing a beautiful 2-meter snow-white fish identified by the system as a level 100 Arowana princess. Her statistics were hilariously tiny, only 500 HP, while her disposition panel listed hatred for abyss, undead, humans, professionals, and especially male professionals. Stats had stopped resembling normal progression. Chen Yang stared at the unfair blacklist. Before he even finished complaining, the princess sprayed water directly into his face, triggering Alex's damage transfer protection. Alex's expression darkened as the harmless attack struck her instead. Dragonfire gathered instantly, while the Night Ranger drew her bow against the terrified fish princess. Chen Yang stopped both summons before the aquarium became seafood barbecue. He ordered Alex to communicate and finally learn the Sea Kingdom's deeper racial history. This world's ocean itself generated magic. Arowana were intelligent sea beings, while humans became powerful land mages, and both civilizations once coexisted peacefully. Ocean politics had become unexpectedly violent. Families commonly lived beside Arowana, and mages formed lifelong contracts with them. Cooperation lasted until Abyss Undead invaded and corrupted increasing numbers of human hearts. Humans initially fought alongside Arowana, but dark magic slowly poisoned trust. Betrayals followed, and the ancient alliance began collapsing from inside rather than outside. The human cost remained painfully obvious. The arrival of foreign professionals made everything worse. Arowana blood was magically rich, valuable as a tonic, and therefore, immediately attractive to people with inventories. Hunting expanded rapidly across all factions, reducing a peaceful, intelligent race toward extinction, while professionals rationalized exploitation as another convenient resource system. The system offered no balance patch. Chen Yang finally understood why the princess hated professionals generally. Her special hatred toward men, however, still seemed oddly specific and demanded another explanation. The implication landed harder than expected. Alex hesitated before explaining that every Arowana was female, and certain male professionals had committed particularly disgraceful acts against captured members of the race. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Chen Yang's imagination reached the implication and immediately regretted asking. The princess, understanding his reaction, began firing furious water jets at his face again. The attacks barely hurt Alex through damage transfer but irritated her enormously. She finally snapped at the princess and demanded better behavior if help was desired. The frightened Arowana princess lowered her head. Chen Yang, now curious, rather than hostile, asked exactly what kind of help she needed from him. The implication landed harder than expected. Alex translated the princess's explanation. Surviving Arowana communities were threatened by abyss forces, professional hunters, and faction warfare surrounding the remaining Sea Kingdom territories. The princess's presence aboard a massacred merchant vessel suggested larger events behind the attack. Chen Yang began connecting the corpses, Japanese formations, and endangered Arowana population. His immediate goal remained advancement, but helping the Arowana might also open faction quests, national fortune, rare rewards, and dense concentrations of legitimate hostile enemies. In Chen Yang's experience, moral choices became significantly easier when doing the decent thing. Also came packaged with excellent EXP and boss access. Another boss discovered terrible timing today. The princess gradually stopped attacking once Alex continued translating. Her hostility toward Chen Yang remained obvious, but desperation made temporary cooperation possible despite centuries of abuse. Chen Yong decided to investigate the nearby island and abyss strongholds while keeping the princess safe. The situation promised both enemies and answers in extraordinary quantities. He transferred the Arowana princess from the tank carefully, ensuring neither Alex nor the Night Ranger interpreted another splash as authorization for immediate execution. Common sense quietly left the conversation. With the merchant ship's victims settled into King's space, Chen Yong left behind a vessel that had become evidence of cruelty rather than simple battlefield debris. His anger remained controlled but sharp. Whoever committed the massacre had moved from possible farming target to personally interesting and unhealthy category for any enemy. Alex carried him back toward the island while the Night Ranger continuously scanned surrounding waters, separating human settlements from truly hostile concentrations before attacks began. The Sea Kingdom now looked less like a straightforward leveling area and more like a multi-faction war built atop racial persecution, abyss corruption, and foreign exploitation. Chen Yong disliked complicated plots, but plots had an annoying habit of attaching themselves to him whenever rare rewards, endangered races, and world bosses occupied one map. The Arowana princess remained physically weak despite level 100, suggesting her importance came from bloodline, identity, or special talent rather than combat statistics. That talent changed his options immediately. Her voice of heaven and river sea affinity hinted at deeper abilities. Chen Yong filed that information away, having learned repeatedly that unusual talents mattered more than simple HP. Alex continued translating occasional squeaks and gestures, proving unexpectedly useful as interpreter, mount, bodyguard, and damage sponge, the most overqualified multilingual transportation service imaginable. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Through those conversations, Chen Yong learned how dramatically relations had changed. Peaceful coexistence became exploitation after abyss, corruption, and professional greed entered the world. Each world introduced stranger rules afterward. By the time their history lesson ended, he understood the Sea Kingdom's conflict clearly enough. Everyone wanted power, and the Arowana had paid the ugliest price. Alex finally explained the princess's special hatred. Arowana were entirely female, and some male professionals had abused captured members of the race in unforgivable ways. Chen Yong understood the implication a second too loudly. Outraged, the princess sprayed him repeatedly, soaking his face while Alex absorbed several laughably tiny transferred damage numbers. Alex eventually scolded the fish into stopping, reminding her that Chen Yong was being asked for help. The princess lowered her head, suddenly looking pitiful. Her request was enormous: drive away the abyss undead and restore peace to the sea. The system immediately triggered another national fortune quest. The quest had clearly escalated again. Rebirth of the Arowana Kingdom required clearing Deer Island, driving out allied hostile professionals, finding the sea god's blessing, and purifying an abyss curse formation. Rewards included 200 million EXP, a level 80 class skill, fortune contribution, Arowana prosperity, and imperial fortune. Chen Yong considered it extremely convenient farming. Another enemy became experienced remarkably quickly. The princess sensed his lingering inappropriate curiosity and sprayed him again. Alex laughed and revealed the Arowana princess could actually hear Chen Yong's thoughts directly. Curious, Chen Yong wondered how someone telepathic got captured. Alex explained Arowana were naturally trusting, while humans were exceptionally talented at disguising bad intentions. Talent scaling became increasingly absurd afterward. Chen Yong deliberately thought flattering things. The foolish princess immediately spun happily and blew heart-shaped bubbles, proving telepathy offered no protection against competent salesmanship. Suddenly, white light erupted around her and her eyes turned red. The Night Ranger sensed a huge approaching fleet, but the princess urgently demanded something else. Alex translated, the princess wanted back into the ocean. Chen Yong simply reached into the tank and picked her up before Alex could finish warning him. The fish turned pink, stiffened, and began trembling. Alarmed, Chen Yong rushed outside and threw her into the sea, where the water exploded upward dramatically. When the waves settled, the tiny fish had become a colossal snow-white creature larger than the merchant vessel, now carrying 5 billion HP and monstrous attributes. Her full ocean form possessed enormous mana, 6 powerful water skills, divine favor, and terrifying statistics. Chen Yong finally understood why capturing her normally was impossible. At that moment, a large combat fleet surrounded them, broadcasting an inspection order. The system identified it as Deer Island's allied 7th Fleet. The interface remained brutally literal throughout. More than 100 specialized warships carried magic artillery and Arowana capture equipment. Rising Sun flags identified the force as a hostile Japanese professional faction aligned locally. Chen Yong smiled when the fleet threatened surrender within 5 seconds. His evil god progression required enemies, and more than 100 ships had volunteered simultaneously. The Deer Island faction had become arrogant after siding with Abyss forces, frequently abusing weaker local groups and treating rival professionals as disposable obstacles. The shoreline offered no neutral ground. Chen Yong had never fought professionals seriously before, so curiosity mixed with anger. On the flagship, Commander Kojibo prepared to recover the Arowana princess personally. His adjutant confirmed the royal merchant vessel and warned that powerful foreign professionals might be aboard. Kojibo dismissed the risk, trusting Deer Island's local military dominance. he still ordered a formal warning first, mostly to preserve plausible explanations afterward. Apparently, even villainous fleets respected paperwork when international consequences might become inconvenient. Kojibo believed capturing the Arowana princess would make his faction dominant throughout the Sea Kingdom. Hundreds of magic cannons then aimed and fired together. The silence carried more than words. Shells exploded around the merchant vessel, throwing towering water columns into the air. When the spray cleared, the ship remained completely unharmed despite concentrated level 70 equivalent bombardment. Japanese sailors panicked after spotting skeletons across the deck, mistaking them for vengeful sea spirits, an interpretation made understandable by their faction's long list of atrocities. Fear spread quickly because sailors knew the sea remembered cruelty poorly. The more guilty the crew, the easier supernatural explanations became to believe. The sea carried consequences in silence. Chen Yong had simply summoned defensive skeletons and layered protection around the vessel. The terrifying ghost ship was mostly good positioning plus wildly excessive statistics. The 7th Fleet fired again, but repeated bombardment achieved little. Their expensive naval superiority had encountered the unpleasant economic principle called sunk cost. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Chen Yang prepared retaliation, while the Arowana princess circled nearby. Her immense ocean form turned surrounding waves into an extension of her own battlefield control. The princess's presence also made the fleet increasingly desperate. Decades of failed hunting had taught them her value, though apparently not sufficient humility. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Chen Yang's first attacks tore through ships and hostile professionals, rapidly increasing evil god progress, while King's Space began collecting defeated souls automatically. The system rewarded professional kills with EXP according to level, proving human opponents could indeed become progression, an answer Chen Yang received under grim circumstances. The system offered no balance patch. Kojibo's fleet responded by activating stronger formations and special defenses, trying desperately to protect warships designed for capturing Arowana rather than surviving Chen Yang. The implication landed harder than expected. Several elite professionals stepped forward using invulnerability, immunity, and support effects. Their preparation showed Deer Island had specifically built strategies around dangerous outsiders. The shoreline offered no neutral ground. Chen Yang answered with overwhelming range and true damage, making ordinary defensive tricks considerably less comforting than their owners had expected minutes earlier. The Arowana princess supported from the sea, manipulating waves and disrupting enemy ships. Her hatred toward the hostile fleet turned earlier childishness into frightening concentration. Alex joined with Dragonfire, while the Night Ranger eliminated distant threats. The 3 summons attacked from air, sea, and extreme range around Chen Yang simultaneously. Deer Island professionals gradually realized they had not surrounded one merchant ship. They had surrounded a mobile raid group whose strongest members still looked bored. Desperation pushed Kojibo toward a hidden trump card tied to the Abyss faction. Protection connected with the blood god Harmon and its terrifying shadow power. A massive, blood-colored serpent manifested above the fleet, carrying divine pressure and enough health to make ordinary third advancement professionals reconsider their career plans. Blood debts rarely stayed metaphorical here. Kojibo regained confidence immediately. Abyss blessings had saved Deer Island forces before, and Harmon's shadow represented power far beyond ordinary Sea Kingdom combatants. Chen Yang, however, saw another boss-shaped health bar. The difference between theology and loot opportunity remained mostly philosophical from his current perspective. The boss barely received proper ceremony. He ordered the Night Ranger to prepare a full precision shot. Dark power gathered along her bow as the divine shadow descended toward them. The implication landed harder than expected. The charge reached maximum. Her arrow crossed the battlefield with absolute hit properties and monstrous inherited attributes, striking Harmon's blood serpent before anyone could react. Stats had stopped resembling normal progression. A damage number exceeding 2.7 billion exploded above the shadow. The enormous serpent burst apart instantly, dissolving into crimson fog scattered by sea wind. Silence swallowed the 7th Fleet. Kojibo had called divine protection a cheat moments earlier. Chen Yang's counterattack made that blessing look like a free trial. A level 100 Abyss Shadow had been erased with enormous excess damage. Even veteran professionals could not decide what advancement level should reasonably produce that result. Kojibo reached the most intelligent conclusion of his day and ordered immediate retreat. Warships began turning frantically while crews abandoned every remaining thought of capturing anything. The Arowana princess answered with a colossal wave, rocking ships hundreds of meters long and disrupting their escape formation before it properly began. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Alex descended onto the flagship and flooded its deck with dragonfire. Burn professionals scattered as Chen Yong jumped down calmly behind his contracted dragon. Kojibo recognized him immediately. Chen Yong's name already occupied priority kill lists, and seeing the famous King's Lich in person replaced strategy with raw fear. His visible panel made things worse. Level 84, more than 54 million HP, billions of mana, and spirit above 10 million after relentless point investment. The skill list included King's Tomb, Magic Tower, Bone Spike Prison, Soul Extraction, King's Contract, Night Summoning, and an expanding catalog of passive curses. The silence carried more than words. Even 4th advancement professionals might envy those statistics. Kojibo dropped to his knees and begged for mercy, quickly followed by thousands of terrified faction members. Chen Yong found the collective begging unbearably loud. Soul extraction expanded across kilometers, killing nearly everyone aboard the 7th Fleet except Kojibo within moments. Death clearly did not end negotiations. Thousands of professional kills produced EXP, Evil God Progress, and souls for King's worship. Kojibo watched his entire force disappear and psychologically collapsed. Godhood looked less untouchable around him. Chen Yong deliberately spared him for navigation. When Kojibo protested that no sailors remained, Chen Yong summoned the colossal Arowana princess beside the ship instead. During the forced voyage toward Deer Island, the princess swam alongside, dancing, splashing, and blowing heart-shaped bubbles as her affection notifications steadily increased. Island politics were getting dangerously crowded. Chen Yong could not understand why she had become so attached after he destroyed only one hostile fleet. Kojibo, who had hunted her for decades, understood even less. Deer Island had spent fortunes on traps and capture operations without approaching her. Chen Yong had somehow earned cooperation through rescue, overwhelming strength, and accidental handling. Kojibo secretly transmitted Chen Yong's arrival, statistics, and abilities to headquarters, hoping reinforcements could kill him and recover the Arowana princess on land. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. Chen Yong did not notice the message and would not have cared. His goal was larger than Deer Island. Additional enemy reinforcements merely improved local monster density. The Night Ranger eventually announced Deer Island ahead. System markers confirmed the Japanese Abyss faction base, and hostile names began appearing throughout Chen Yong's perception. The interface remained brutally literal throughout. He wondered why the island's ghost formation had vanished, suspecting their captured warship automatically bypassed security. Either way, the missing barrier saved time. The Arowana princess urgently asked to accompany him ashore. Chen Yong refused because she was, in his words, a fish without useful land transportation options. Another water spray answered him. Alex laughed and explained the real problem. Once Chen Yong had physically held the princess, leaving her behind became complicated. Arowana were extremely pure. If unwanted physical contact occurred, rejection could weaken or even kill them. Chen Yong's accepted touch therefore carried powerful emotional significance. He finally understood why the princess had convulsed earlier. Then another question appeared. How had anyone placed such a powerful creature inside the merchant tank? The answer embarrassed him immediately. Merchants could never overpower her. The trusting princess must have been deceived into shrinking and entering the tank herself. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Chen Yong surrendered and allowed her along. Delighted, she shrank into a thumb-sized miniature mermaid, eliminating the practical issue of carrying aquarium equipment into battle. Deer Island Harbor was packed with military and logistics vessels. Kojibo relaxed secretly because headquarters already had elite professionals with immunity abilities rushing toward the docks. Chen Yong stepped ashore without caution. Harbor workers assumed anyone arriving aboard a military ship was important and approached politely to greet the unfamiliar visitor. He answered the first greeting with a fatal backhand, instantly killing the hostile faction harbor worker and adding another point to Evil God progression. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. King's Mercy resurrected the corpse as a bloodstained skeleton. Kojibo stared in horror, realizing Chen Yong could turn defeated enemies into additional manpower automatically. Tens of thousands worked around the harbor. Kojibo wondered whether Chen Yong intended to kill everyone affiliated with the hostile base rather than distinguish combat from logistics. Chen Yong viewed Deer Island as an active enemy installation, supporting Abyss forces and Arowana persecution. Once faction hostility became official, he treated resistance as combat. Workers fled while port guards rushed forward. Even security personnel around level 50 stopped abruptly after seeing Chen Yong's team health bars and ancient equipment. More than 50 million HP stood beside allies carrying hundreds of millions. The guards' courage performed an emergency system shutdown before Chen Yong even attacked. Chen Yong raised his crimson ancient staff and called for his forces to appear, deciding the harbor had enough targets to justify a full military deployment. Space distorted across the docks. King's Graveyard and Magic Tower opened as enormous gates, and disciplined skeleton formations began pouring onto Deer Island. His undead army kept expanding relentlessly. Harbor infrastructure shook beneath thousands of undead summons. Workers who had considered Chen Yong one strange visitor now faced something resembling an invading supernatural army. Skeleton berserkers spread through defensive positions while mages occupied range. The Night Ranger tracked hidden threats, and Alex remained ready to intercept heavy attacks. The skeleton ranks answered without hesitation. The Arowana princess stayed near seawater, using her control over waves to prevent ships from escaping or reinforcements from approaching safely by harbor routes. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. Deer Island alarms finally activated across the base. Kojibo's coded warning had become unnecessary because Chen Yong was announcing himself with architecture-level subtlety. The shoreline offered no neutral ground. Elite defenders began arriving with specialized invincibility, immunity, and control skills, exactly the kind of countermeasures headquarters believed could trap an overpowered rookie. Chen Yong welcomed them. The more organized their resistance became, the easier his evil god progress and national fortune objectives would be to advance together. His summons attacked in layered waves, forcing defenders to spend immunity effects early while soul extraction waited for vulnerable moments and clustered formations. His enemies discovered death had paperwork. Several enemy professionals attempted ranged assassination, only for the Night Ranger to detect hostile intent before their attacks launched and eliminate them from impossible distances. Others tried controlling Chen Yang directly. Dark Guardian and King's support rendered most attempts pointless, while Alex's permanent protection absorbed damage that somehow reached him. The defenders had prepared for a powerful player. They had not prepared for a powerful player, Private Dragon, Divine Fish, Sniper, and thousands of undead employees. Harbor resistance rapidly collapsed, opening the route toward Deer Island's interior. Chen Yang continued forward instead of pausing over victory or admiring the destruction. Island politics were getting dangerously crowded. Behind him, Qin Tiany's hidden plan was already failing. The assassins intended for the East Sea had become additional enemies rather than meaningful obstacles. Chen Yang's rapid leveling continued as hostile professionals and abyss creatures fell. Every system notification pulled him farther beyond the assumptions his enemies had planned around. Deer Island leadership scrambled to identify an answer, increasingly dependent on stronger abyss patrons and secret support rather than their own professional forces. The shoreline offered no neutral ground. Somewhere deeper on the island, commanders received updated reports that sounded impossible. Entire harbor teams erased, defenses broken, and Chen Yang still taking negligible damage. Reinforcements began gathering inland, including higher-level professionals and hidden assets not normally deployed against someone below level 100 in a restricted secret realm. His level curve kept breaking expectations. Chen Yang advanced anyway, treating the escalating response as confirmation that he was walking toward better bosses rather than into a carefully constructed trap. The boss barely received proper ceremony. The Night Ranger's prey tracking mapped concentrations ahead, giving him an enormous information advantage. Surprise attacks became nearly impossible unless they exceeded her detection mechanics entirely. Alex's dragon senses added another layer, while the tiny Arowana princess could communicate through the sea itself, turning the surrounding environment into intelligence infrastructure. The sea carried consequences in silence. For the first time, Chen Yang's collection of strange companions looked less like miscellaneous loot and more like a deliberately assembled elite command unit. He smiled toward Deer Island's interior and ordered the skeleton army onward. Whatever waited, there had chosen the wrong day to rely on conventional numbers. Chen Yang opened both gates of the king, flooding Deer Island harbor with skeleton troops. Far inland, Allied commander Inukai Chiji secretly met masked assassin Fan Laoba. Fan Laoba, already level 180, demanded cooperation against Chen Yang. Inukai questioned the political risk of murdering Great Qin's unique mythic rising genius. Nothing about this quest stayed simple. Inukai then negotiated shamelessly, arguing Fan wanted the assassination urgently and therefore should pay. Fan concealed Qin Tiany's involvement and offered 5 million coins. Inukai pretended family expenses were unbearable, inventing increasingly ridiculous relatives and pregnancies until Fan, visibly disgusted, raised the assassination payment to 10 million. Family made the conflict painfully personal. The instant Fan threatened to hire Kojibo instead, Inukai accepted. 10 million to kill a supposedly level 60 rookie sounded like excellent business before updated intelligence arrived. Fan departed in black mist. Inukai privately mocked Great Qin for producing someone willing to pay foreigners to murder one of their own greatest young talents. An encrypted call interrupted his celebration. Kojibo reported Chen Yang already heading toward Deer Island, forcing Inukai to listen carefully as impossible statistics followed. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. Level 84, 50 million HP, 2.72 billion damage, 7th Fleet destroyed. Harmon's shadow erased the 10 million payment suddenly felt much less generous than 5 minutes earlier. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Still, Inukai commanded more than 100,000 elite professionals. He recalled 6 fleets and every third advancement expert, then organized defensive superformations. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Bishops and resurrection teams would create invincible raid groups, while British allies and abyss forces received reinforcement requests centered on the attacking Arowana princess. Then Deer Island shook violently. Inukai realized Chen Yang had arrived before preparations finished, while Fan Laoba was already sailing away toward deeper abyss territory. Qin Tianyi had secretly used a special item to bypass Sea Kingdom level restrictions, inserting Fan's level 180 assassination team after they joined the Abyss faction. Their plan relied on foreign professionals and Abyss forces exhausting Chen Yang first, letting hidden assassins strike afterward without exposing Qin Tianyi's involvement directly. Common sense quietly left the conversation. At the harbor, Chen Yang sat eating barbecue while Alex grilled meat with dragonfire and the Night Ranger massaged his shoulders, luxury surrounded by active apocalypse. Skeletons chased defenders through the docks, and every death produced another resurrected skeleton. Loot beams covered the ground as the undead army literally recruited through casualties. A battle cry announced organized reinforcements. Level 70+ soldiers filled the harbor entrance behind a level 90 ghost-cleaving swordsman carrying an ancient Japanese class. Resistance looked increasingly theoretical from there. The swordsman began a long speech about Chen Yang not understanding death. The Night Ranger ended the lecture with one normal shot before the proverb reached completion. More than 3.2 million damage killed the level 90 expert instantly. Every nearby professional froze, discovering that Chen Yong's sniper considered elite enemies ordinary targets. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Bishops rushed to resurrect him, but Chen Yong opened King's space first. The dead swordsman's soul vanished into darkness before their revival magic could function. King's mercy immediately raised the corpse as a katana-wielding skeleton. Enemy troops realized Chen Yong could both block resurrection and recycle fallen experts against them. Kojibo screamed for a full charge. Nearly 1,000 defenders rushed forward while Chen Yong remained seated, eating barbecue and drinking cola taken from a harbor shop. Hidden skeletons suddenly surged from buildings and containers. Berserkers, warriors, archers, mages, zombies, and revived dead numbering tens of thousands around the attackers. His undead army kept expanding relentlessly. The defenders were erased within minutes. High-level kills showered EXP, evil god progress, and souls, while Chen Yong reached level 85 without leaving his barbecue spot. His army grew beyond 50,000 through resurrection. When the harbor finally fell quiet, Chen Yong simply redirected the expanding force toward Deer Island's interior. Inukai's carefully prepared formations began arriving in waves, combining immunity, invulnerability, healing, resurrection, and layered formation magic intended to grind Chen Yong down slowly. The implication landed harder than expected. Chen Yong responded by applying overwhelming true damage, battlefield control, and endless summons, forcing support teams to spend life-saving abilities faster than they could recover. Once defenders died, King's space removed their souls before bishops could revive them. Inukai's resurrection strategy therefore collapsed at the mechanic level, not merely damage. Harbor buildings became battlegrounds as skeletons spread through defensive positions. Chen Yong's forces multiplied with every hostile casualty, turning attrition into his greatest advantage. The skeleton ranks answered without hesitation. The more troops Inukai committed, the larger Chen Yong's army became. It was the military equivalent of trying to extinguish fire with premium gasoline. Enemy commanders finally understood the problem but could not withdraw easily. Deer Island's importance to the Abyss faction and Arowana operations forced them to continue resisting. Chen Yong's national fortune quest simultaneously advanced through hostile professional kills, Abyss cleanup, and island liberation, stacking multiple progression systems onto one war. Rewards usually meant larger problems afterward. The tiny Arowana princess remained nearby, occasionally cheering, splashing, or providing support while her affection continued rising with each enemy organization Chen Yong dismantled. Opposition increasingly resembled voluntary self-harm anyway. Alex guarded him closely, and the Night Ranger eliminated distant commanders. Every conventional assassination route met a different summon specifically designed to make it embarrassing. Inukai eventually withdrew toward prepared inland positions, hoping terrain, formations, foreign allies, and stronger Abyss support could accomplish what the harbor defenders could not. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Chen Yong followed without hurry. The army ahead offered excellent EXP, while the hidden level 180 assassins remained undetected only because they stayed outside immediate combat range. Fan Laba continued negotiating with Abyss contacts, believing enough chaos would create a brief window where Chen Yong's defenses finally exposed something resembling vulnerability. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. His team specialized in ghost shadow assassination and level suppression, tools that normally made low-level geniuses helpless. Chen Yong's strange summons complicated every assumption. The Night Ranger's prey tracking, in particular, threatened stealth itself. Any assassin, developing genuine hostility within range, risked becoming marked before approaching the target. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Deer Island's battlefield expanded across kilometers as skeletons clashed with organized professional formations. Chen Yong's magic and curses repeatedly erased clusters that survived frontline attacks. Enemy bishops layered invulnerability across chosen units, forcing Chen Yong to rotate targets or simply wait until defensive windows expired before deleting them immediately afterward. Japanese commanders tried sacrificial charges, ranged bombardment, stealth squads, and formation traps. None changed the basic problem. Chen Yong had more tools than their strategy possessed answers. British allied teams eventually arrived to reinforce Deer Island, joining the Abyss-backed defense, because faction rewards and existing agreements outweighed concerns about Chen Yong's reputation. Their arrival briefly stabilized several positions. Higher quality equipment and coordinated battlefield roles slowed the skeleton advance enough to make defenders believe resistance might matter. His army made solitude mostly theoretical. Chen Yong responded by expanding summon gates again. Fresh undead poured forward, restoring numerical dominance before the opposing side finished, congratulating itself. Every kill further increased King's worship and resurrection numbers. Deer Island's defensive manpower was literally transferring allegiance after death, which morale experts would probably classify negatively. Inukai finally abandoned ordinary attrition and prepared deeper Abyss intervention, sending urgent messages about the Arowana princess and portraying Chen Yong as an existential faction threat. The response came from Blood God Harmon's forces, whose interest intensified after Chen Yong had already destroyed one divine shadow earlier at sea. Godhood looked less untouchable around him. Abyss energy thickened over Deer Island. Blood-colored mist rolled across the sky as a far more terrifying presence began manifesting above the battlefield. Every island seemed politically combustible now. Chen Yong looked up with interest rather than fear, The system finally displayed the enemy he had wanted, another Harmon avatar carrying enormous boss statistics. The avatar's divine pressure froze ordinary professionals across the island. Even veteran third advancement fighters instinctively stopped, recognizing something far beyond their intended raid difficulty. Island politics were getting dangerously crowded. Chen Yong's companions reacted differently. Alex prepared dragon fire, the Night Ranger raised her bow, and the Arowana princess's songs began affecting the surrounding sea. Harmon's avatar addressed Chen Yong with divine fury, enraged that a mortal had destroyed its shadow, opposed Abyss interests, and repeatedly interfered with Deer Island. Chen Yong mostly noticed the enormous HP bar and advancement potential. Divine outrage sounded serious, but his system had trained him to associate speeches with rewards. Harmon unleashed corrupted blood mist across Deer Island, applying a lethal effect that drained 10% of maximum HP every second until targets died. Island politics were getting dangerously crowded. Chen Yong's expression changed immediately. Even his defenses could not casually ignore percentage-based damage, especially because every hit transferred onto Alex through their contract. At that rate, Alex would die in seconds, removing his permanent protection. Chen Yong instantly ordered the Arowana princess to shield the Red Dragon Queen. Joy's song covered Alex, blocking all damage and negative effects without dispel vulnerability. The terrifying blood corruption vanished from her status bar immediately. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Chen Yong's ordinary summons continued losing health, so the Arowana princess expanded her support while his army launched full offense against Harmon's enormous avatar. Chen Yong opened with soul extraction. Billions of true damage struck first, followed by countless skeleton attacks, each dealing hundreds of millions after accumulated bonuses. Tens of thousands of damage numbers buried Harmon. His HP should have vanished repeatedly, but a force lock stopped the bar at 5 billion. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. The avatar transformed into a colossal crimson flying serpent, revealing an inevitable second phase. Chen Yong sighed. Apparently, divine beings also respected boss design traditions. The silence carried more than words. Before he could resummon casualties, the Arowana princess began singing Clear Waves. Her voice instantly erased the island-wide blood mist and blocked future negative effects. Chen Yong nearly hugged her. The absurdly trusting fish had become a god-tier support capable of invalidating one of Harmon's most dangerous mechanics completely. Even divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Furious, Harmon threw a blood god spear directly at the princess. Chen Yong ordered every skeleton warrior to activate Guardian Interception at once. More than 2,800 warriors burned most of their remaining HP and teleported forward, creating thousands of layered shields capable of absorbing even true damage. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Their combined effective shield exceeded 10 billion. Harmon's spear shattered only the outer layer, dropping one skeleton warrior while leaving the princess untouched. Alarmed, the Arowana princess slapped the sea and used wave walking, dramatically accelerating allies, slowing enemies, and restoring the army's lost HP at extraordinary speed. Chen Yong laughed at the teamwork and ordered everyone to stop slacking. Berserkers, mages, archers, and the Night Ranger unleashed another overwhelming damage cycle. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Harmon's remaining HP disappeared under the barrage. The colossal divine avatar fell like a collapsing skyscraper, shaking Deer Island when its body struck the ground. Killing the level, 110 Blood God Avatar awarded 80 million EXP and completed Path of the Evil God 2, unlocking a new title, Murder Maniac. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. The title doubled all attributes, tripled skill damage, tripled range, and granted Berserk plus Frenzy, 2 emergency states designed for moments when death approached. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Berserk activated below 30% HP with huge damage and speed bonuses, while Frenzy triggered on lethal damage with even larger boosts and temporary unstoppable aggression. Chen Yong stared at the survival package in disbelief. If several layers of defensive cheating still failed, he reasoned, fate probably deserved the victory. Some victories still left scars behind. King's worship then absorbed Harmon's divine remnant's soul, expanded Chen Yong's HP, purified King's space, and unlocked noble ranks capable of spreading soul abilities. Chen Yong appointed Harmon's remnant as a baron, despite receiving almost comically enormous hostility from the imprisoned divine soul. Their relationship was not improving professionally. More importantly, the kill completed Chen Yong's third advancement quest. The system transformed King's Lich into Great Lich, signaling another major qualitative jump. The quest had clearly escalated again. King's Graveyard evolved into King's City, expanding the army with advanced warriors, berserkers, archers, and skeleton knights, whose attributes inherited huge percentages of Chen Yong's spirit. King's Magic Tower became King's capital, producing advanced fire, ice, water, and warlock skeletons with complete class-like skill sets rather than simple combat spells. The skeleton ranks answered without hesitation. Advanced skeleton warlocks could even summon additional undead themselves. Chen Yong had effectively created an army whose soldiers could manufacture their own reinforcements. Night summoning evolved into Night Queen summoning. The Night Ranger returned through a void fissure wearing a black crown, cloak, battle gear, and overwhelming royal presence. She knelt before Chen Yong as Supreme Master, voice gentle despite freezing authority. Her loyalty had transformed from obedience into something bordering religious worship. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Chen Yong checked the panel and nearly laughed. The level 100 unique hero possessed 1.69 billion HP and enormous inherited attributes across every basic statistic. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. Strength, agility, constitution, and spirit each gained millions from Chen Yong's bonuses, turning her already dangerous precision shot into a genuinely strategic weapon. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. Her active abilities now included multi-shot, shock arrow, rapid fire, arrow rain, precision shot, divine step, and fatal shot for varied battlefield roles. Passives expanded with Queen's Aura, Eagle Eye, Strong Shot, Beast Protection, Prey Tracking, and True Perception, allowing her to control range and intelligence simultaneously. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. True Perception automatically revealed hostile invisible units entering within 5 kilometers, meaning Qin Tianyi's hidden assassins had just acquired another serious operational problem. Chen Yong smiled at that possibility. Anyone sent to ambush him would now need to defeat an army, a dragon, divine support, and a queen who hated stealth. He continued reading advancement gains and discovered Great Lich Rebirth, another survival talent automatically transforming him into untargetable lich form after lethal damage. Talent scaling became increasingly absurd afterward. The Rebirth effect repeatedly teleported him while restoring health until fully revived. With a 48-hour cooldown, Chen Yong mentally awarded the advancement 5 stars. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Combined with titles and passives, he now possessed multiple independent death prevention mechanics. At some point, killing Chen Yong had become a project management problem. That outcome arrived faster than expected. Per-level growth also exploded after 3rd advancement. Massive strength, constitution, agility, spirit, and free attribute gains would compound with his remaining billion-point cheat. Deer Island's surviving professionals had no idea Chen Yong had become dramatically stronger during the fight. They only knew Harmon's avatar had fallen before them. Great Qin, observers watching from surrounding waters stared at the aftermath, unable to reconcile a newly awakened professional with the death of a divine avatar. Foreign factions reacted with equal alarm. A battle intended to trap Chen Yong had instead handed him advancement, titles, divine souls, and improved summons. Souls made every victory more complicated. Inukai's carefully assembled raid strategy had therefore achieved the opposite of its purpose. Chen Yong entered Deer Island dangerous and emerged from Harmon's corpse catastrophically upgraded. Fan Laoba's hidden assassination team received updated reports and began reconsidering timing. Their target was no longer remotely the level 60 rookie described during planning. Levels were becoming mere administrative details. The Night Queen rose beside Chen Yong, black gold bow across her back. One glance carried enough pressure to make ordinary professionals instinctively lower their heads. Alex remained nearby, while the Arowana princess continued singing across the battlefield. Chen Yong's strongest companions now resembled an increasingly improbable royal court. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. He looked over Deer Island's remaining hostile forces and smiled. 3rd advancement was complete, but national fortune objectives and evil god progression still offered excellent reasons to continue. Somewhere beyond the smoke, every enemy commander reached the same conclusion independently. Whatever Chen Yong had been before Harmon arrived, he was worse now. The road ahead promised worse surprises. The Night Queen inherited 20% of Chen Yong's spirit into every attribute. Her normal shots exceeded 6 million, while full precision shots surpassed 7.6 billion. True Perception automatically exposed hostile invisible units within 5 kilometers. Chen Yong immediately thought of Qin Tianyi's assassins and smiled at their future disappointment. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Great Lich Rebirth added yet another survival layer, making Chen Yong untargetable after lethal damage, while teleporting repeatedly and restoring health until revival completed. Advancement also increased attribute gains and point efficiency to 50 spirit per click. Chen Yong decided future downtime would become dedicated industrial-scale button pressing. Stats had stopped resembling normal progression. Harmon's corpse then produced 2 golden drops, Legendary Blood Curse and Abyss, Legendary Blood God's Curse, both perfectly compatible with Chen Yong's dark profession. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Blood Curse fired, Spirit-scaled arrows, removed enemy buffs, inflicted long-lasting curse damage, cleansed allied debuffs, and healed allies through the same terrifying mechanic. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. With Chen Yong's current spirit, the curse could last hundreds of days. At 1 billion spirit, victims might need decades and a demigod dispeller. Blood God's Curse, a level 100 one-handed wand, granted thousands of attributes plus enormous percentage increases to stats, resistances, skill damage, and critical damage. Divine Authority was losing its mystique. Skill hits reduced magic defense by 80% and created permanent damage-based shields, turning every successful attack into both offense and additional survivability. The wand could even summon a Blood God projection on hit. Chen Yong equipped it immediately, enjoying the possibility of using Harmon against Harmon someday. He then brought the Arowana princess to Deer Island's sacred altar, where an elegant sea god statue resembled an Eastern heavenly consort rather than Western mythology. Black blood stained the beautiful statue. The princess began crying and urgently asked Chen Yong, through Alex, to wipe the corruption away. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. Chen Yong bowed respectfully before touching the statue with damp cloth. Blue light erupted instantly, spreading across the sea like a vast supernatural sunrise. Gray-black waters became brilliant blue, clouds brightened, seabirds returned, fish filled the ocean, vegetation revived, and abyss corpses dissolved across the purified region. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. The first Arowana National Fortune Quest completed, granting 200 million EXP, a skill book, fortune contribution, prosperity, and another 100 imperial fortune. Nothing about this quest stayed simple. Then a second quest appeared: rescue the sea god's avatar, purge the Abyss Temple, rebuild the Arowana Kingdom, and officially enter faction warfare. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Rewards included 50 billion EXP, a level 150 exclusive skill, ancient equipment, 2,670 fortune contribution, and 600 national fortune numbers large enough to justify danger. Chen Yong accepted. Faction war opened immediately, ranking the Arowana Kingdom beside Abyss Undead, royal family, and civilians across the entire Sea Kingdom. Blood ties offered no easy answers. The Abyss controlled 70.5%, while the newly revived Arowana Kingdom owned only 0.5%, essentially Deer Island plus optimism and one extremely determined fish. Detecting the poverty-level influence, the system offered assistance. Chen Yong accepted so quickly, he joked that even game mechanics had discovered targeted welfare programs. The interface remained brutally literal throughout. The sea god's blessing appeared, allowing Chen Yong to travel freely through air, ocean, mountains, and rivers, anywhere inside the Sea Kingdom without restrictions. Divine authority was losing its mystique. He tested it by stepping into empty air and standing there naturally. Alex and the Night Queen stared as though their master had personally patched gravity. Chen Yong enjoyed the effect briefly before remembering his exclusive skill reward. Because floating dramatically was excellent but damage remained a more practical hobby, the numbers spoke louder than strategy. Summon Seabone Giant called an ancient undead star into a 5-kilometer area, dealing 3,000% spirit damage before transforming into a colossal permanent combat summon. Its undead flame lingered permanently wherever the giant walked, draining 10% maximum HP every second until dispelled. Chen Yong immediately appreciated the environmental irresponsibility. The new faction quest directed him toward the Abyss Temple and Sea God's avatar, while enemy factions began reacting to the Arowana Kingdom's sudden reappearance. System announcements spread across Sea Kingdom forces, informing professionals that Deer Island had changed hands, and a previously extinct faction now officially existed again. The system offered no balance patch. Great Qin players recognized Chen Yong's involvement immediately. Foreign commanders recognized a strategic nightmare. His actions were changing world influence rather than merely gaining levels. Hostile fleets began gathering near Deer Island, combining Japanese, British, Abyss, and other allied forces determined to crush the newborn Arowana faction quickly. Every island seemed politically combustible now. Chen Yong welcomed the concentration. His quest needed enemies, evil god progress needed enemies, and his new Seabone Giant required somewhere irresponsible to land. He positioned himself near the shore while Alex, the Night Queen, and the Arowana Princess prepared. Their strange party now represented the entire Arowana Kingdom militarily. Scout information revealed several 100,000 hostile professionals approaching with Abyss support. Ordinary faction leaders might have panicked. Chen Yong calculated expected EXP instead. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. Enemy commanders assumed numerical superiority, and higher average levels could bury him through repeated immunity, resurrection, and naval bombardment. Earlier failures apparently inspired persistence. His level curve kept breaking expectations. Chen Yong raised Blood God's Curse and tested Blood Curse against approaching targets, discovering its range and spirit scaling had become absurd under his new title bonuses. Cursed blood spread through clustered enemies, stripping buffs and dealing persistent damage, while hostile healers discovered the effect demanded far stronger dispelling power than available. For allied summons, the same skill cleansed harmful effects and restored HP, giving Chen Yong another versatile tool for keeping enormous armies functional during prolonged fights. The Arowana Princess continued strengthening everyone with songs and sea control, while Alex protected Chen Yong and the Night Queen monitored invisible threats approaching Deer Island. Hostile fleets finally reached firing range, and the sea filled with spells, artillery, summoned creatures, and formation effects from multiple allied professional factions. Ocean politics had become unexpectedly violent. Chen Yong let defensive skeletons absorb the opening barrage. Their vast numbers and inherited attributes reduced the impressive fleet attack into manageable visual noise. He then retaliated with curses, long-range magic, skeleton charges, and Night Queen arrows, rapidly shredding frontline formations designed to survive ordinary raid bosses. The boss barely received proper ceremony. The fighting drew stronger abyss creatures from nearby waters. Chen Yong's faction war progress climbed while King's Worship accumulated souls from defeated hostile combatants. The sea god's blessing let him reposition freely above water and air, making naval terrain meaningless. Enemy admirals discovered ships offered no protection from someone ignoring geography. Surviving leaders attempted negotiations only after their formations began collapsing. Chen Yang found their sudden interest in diplomacy wonderfully synchronized with losing health bars. Another assumption quietly collapsed without warning. He continued toward the Abyss Temple objective, refusing to let faction forces delay him indefinitely. Enemy reinforcements simply became moving EXP on the route forward. Near the next major position, a British fleet commander named Gil Candio arrived with substantial allied warships and openly demanded Chen Yang's surrender for Abyss punishment. Gil was a level 120 paladin with millions of HP and strong holy skills. He offered two choices: return voluntarily or die and return as a corpse. Chen Yang jokingly asked why Britain's supposed talent recruiters had skipped the recruitment option. Gil replied, Deer Island's conquest made Chen Yang's death inevitable. His talent made normal comparisons useless. Chen Yang then asked the obvious question. Knowing he conquered Deer Island alone, why had Gil still arrived personally to become another boss encounter? The human cost remained painfully obvious. Gil began insulting previous commanders as trash. Before he finished, Chen Yang stomped lightly and triggered Summoned Seabone Giant for its first real battlefield test. The sky darkened beneath storm clouds and green lightning. Even Alex felt bloodline pressure while the tiny Arowana princess curled nervously inside her protective bottle. The Night Queen alone stared upward with fierce excitement. Gil's fleet remained confused until an enormous crack split the sky from horizon to horizon. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. A colossal jade-white ancient star emerged through space and began falling toward the sea, igniting green fire as atmosphere screamed around it. Compressed air raised massive waves before impact. Gil finally understood whose skill it was and hurriedly suggested that perhaps negotiations deserved another opportunity. Another enemy became experienced remarkably quickly. Chen Yang reminded him that recruitment had been rejected moments earlier. Panicked professionals abandoned ships, while Gil watched the descending star fill his entire sky. Impact produced 201.6 billion damage and a catastrophic tsunami. Warships overturned like toys while green undead fire spread across 35 kilometers of ocean. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Persistent flames eventually killed even professionals relying on temporary invincibility. Japanese, British, and Abyss forces disappeared into relentless system notifications and stored souls. Gil Candio also died, while King's worship gained hundreds of thousands of souls, and Chen Yang climbed 10 levels from the enormous combined EXP. His enemies discovered death had paperwork. Roughly 690,000 enemies had become more than 40 billion EXP. Chen Yang calmly called 10 levels not bad, probably upsetting every professional who valued effort. At the impact center, the ancient star unfolded and rose as a gigantic seabone giant, so tall, the surrounding water barely reached its knees. The sea carried consequences in silence. The level 110 unique hero possessed 14.4 billion HP and attributes near 48 million, making its enormous bone sword considerably more than decorative equipment. Stats had stopped resembling normal progression. Undead Fury Flame permanently burned 10% maximum HP per second, while Ancient Emperor's sword gave every attack a 50% chance of immediate execution. Resistance looked increasingly theoretical from there. The execution ignored blocking, evasion, and special survival mechanics. Chen Yang stared delightedly at a summon capable of turning full health bosses into coin flips. Compared with the Seabone Giant and Night Queen, Alex's damage had fallen badly behind. Chen Yang looked toward the dragon, wondering how to strengthen her next. Alex noticed the comparison and lowered her head, clearly afraid she might become obsolete beside summons, whose presence now felt catastrophically superior. No joke could soften that truth. Chen Yang reassured her indirectly by asking for a ride to East Fuji City, despite his ability to walk through air, instantly restoring the dragon's confidence. Alex transformed happily and launched skyward. The Seabone Giant followed through the ocean at terrifying speed, its 48 million agility making size almost irrelevant. The sea carried consequences in silence. Deer Island remained covered in permanent green undead flames after their departure, leaving future cleanup as an unpleasant problem for whichever expert arrived next. East Fuji City served as the central settlement of the hostile Japanese Abyss faction, prosperous through Harmon's protection and extensive Sea Kingdom operations. The sea carried consequences in silence. Its residents lived comfortably until a red dragon appeared over the coast with an impossible skeletal giant running behind through the ocean like a nightmare marathoner. Dragonfire erased the first defenders. Headquarters immediately received reports identifying Chen Yang, despite commanders believing Gil's 690,000-person coalition should have killed him. The human cost remained painfully obvious. The local commander ordered the 731 Abyss squad mobilized and demanded diplomatic pressure through East Seaport, threatening to call Chen Yang's attack total war. His confidence lasted until Chen Yang appeared outside the 28th floor window, standing casually in empty air thanks to the sea god's blessing. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Chen Yang politely said he only needed to borrow the commander's head, then fired Blood Curse through the office before anyone organized meaningful resistance. Blood magic always complicated the arithmetic. Damage above 33 billion erased the commander and nearby security. System notifications also flagged certain atrocity-linked targets as granting no EXP despite their deaths. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. The chain continued for more than 10 minutes as Blood Curse spread through official hostile forces, while King's worship collected millions of additional souls. Chen Yong rose rapidly from level 111 toward level 150, finally understanding how faction hostility let blood curse propagate across enormous recognized enemy networks. Blood magic always complicated the arithmetic. The curse could not target anyone he merely disliked. The system required legitimate hostile status established through attacks or recognized faction leadership. Killing the enemy commander converted the entire hostile faction inside Sea Kingdom into valid curse targets, allowing millions of professionals to become simultaneous progression. Ocean politics had become unexpectedly violent. Chen Yong stared at the expanding numbers with approval. This was grinding upgraded from hunting monsters into something resembling continental-scale spreadsheet automation. System influence rankings began shifting dramatically as the hostile Japanese professional faction collapsed, transferring strategic balance toward Abyss, Arowana, royal family, and civilians. Family history had become battlefield ammunition. Across the Sea Kingdom, surviving professionals watched one major faction disappear from influence rankings almost instantly and struggled to understand what weapon could accomplish that. Great Qin observers recognized Chen Yong's involvement and reacted with equal disbelief. He had entered the realm recently and was already rewriting geopolitical mechanics personally. Foreign factions became more cautious, while Abyss forces grew increasingly hostile. Destroying fleets was one matter. Erasing an allied professional faction threatened their entire regional position. Harmon's remaining forces also reacted strongly because Chen Yong had already killed multiple manifestations and imprisoned one divine remnant soul inside King's space. That wound would not disappear quickly. The Arowana princess's influence rose with every liberation and hostile defeat. Her once nearly extinct kingdom was slowly becoming a meaningful faction rather than a system joke. Chen Yong continued toward remaining national fortune objectives instead of stopping at level 150. The enormous reward chains still promised skill books, fortune, and deeper bosses. His spirit continued increasing whenever time allowed, magnifying blood curse range until thousands of kilometers across Sea Kingdom could potentially fall within one cast. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. That range remained limited by hostility requirements, but once a recognized enemy leader attacked him, the curse could suddenly become a civilization-scale nightmare. The battlefield offered no easy compromise. The Seabone Giant followed obediently, leaving permanent undead flames behind whenever combat occurred. Chen Yong increasingly understood why use with caution appeared on ancient skills. Alex carried him despite being slower than his newest summons, while the Night Queen's true perception continuously searched 5 kilometers for invisible assassins or ambushers. The hidden level 180 team sent by Qin Tianyi now faced a worse problem. Chen Yong had become level 150 during the same operation meant to eliminate him. Their level advantage had narrowed dramatically, while his summons, survival mechanics, true damage, and tracking abilities had multiplied beyond original intelligence estimates. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Fan Laoba nevertheless continued following from the shadows, still hoping Abyss bosses or faction warfare would create one brief moment suitable for assassination. Chen Yong remained unaware of the exact team but knew Qin Tianyi had sent trouble. He therefore kept the Night Queen close enough to punish any detected hostility. Great Qin's military and academy leaders outside the realm received increasingly unbelievable reports. Chen Yong was leveling dozens of times faster than historical records allowed. The same reports mentioned Sea Kingdom faction shifts, Harmon's defeated avatar, the Arowana revival, and a giant summon capable of executing targets through survival mechanics. For commanders who once believed academy resources could entice him, the comparison became almost embarrassing. Chen Yong now produced better cultivation opportunities through battle himself. Inside Sea Kingdom, Chen Yong prepared for the next stage of the Arowana quest, aiming toward the Abyss Temple and the imprisoned sea god avatar. Every completed objective pushed Great Qin's imperial fortune higher, transforming his personal progression into national strategic growth and making his survival increasingly politically important. The human cost remained painfully obvious. By level 150, Chen Yong was no longer merely a freakish rookie. He had become a moving faction, army, dungeon-clearing engine, and diplomatic crisis simultaneously. With spirit around 240 million, Blood Curse could cover most of Sea Kingdom, but only targets officially recognized as hostile by the system qualified. The system offered no balance patch. Once Chen Yong killed a recognized hostile commander, however, millions of faction members became valid curse targets simultaneously, explaining his explosive climb to level 150. The faction war board confirmed the hostile Japanese professional faction eliminated, leaving Abyss at 55% and the revived Arowana Kingdom suddenly holding 16%. That wound would not disappear quickly. A hidden title, Native Defender, appeared for defeating massive enemy forces, increasing attributes and intimidation, while triggering another cleanup quest against their principal patron faction. The quest offered no listed reward, but completing it within 5 hours unlocked direct teleportation to the Abyss Temple. Chen Yong immediately called Alex over. The level 150 dragon now flew far faster than ordinary aircraft. Chen Yong mounted her and crossed the ocean while new political consequences unfolded elsewhere. Levels were becoming mere administrative details. At East Seaport, Xiao Chen rejected envoys demanding Great Qin hand over Chen Yong. Personal friction meant nothing compared with surrendering a citizen to foreign authorities. The envoy threatened total war, boasting local military superiority. Xiao Chen calmly repeated that Great Qin would surrender neither Chen Yong nor any other citizen. Before the threat finished, blood curse struck. The envoy and companions died under 672 million damage, leaving Xiao Chen wondering whether diplomacy had literally become fatal. The rune's display updated immediately, confirming the entire hostile faction erased. Xiao Chen finally connected the impossible deaths with Chen Yong's expanding Arowana faction influence. Across Sea Kingdom, other Great Qin teams received the same revelation. Yin Shengnan, struggling through quests, found herself surrounded by a larger, hostile professional group. One vulgar attacker mocked her appearance and misgendered her. When Yin Shengnan angrily corrected him, he demanded humiliating proof while his companions laughed. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. She swore retaliation if touched. The attacker boasted nobody capable of destroying his faction had even been born an impressively unfortunate final sentence. Blood curse hit instantly, dropping him and every hostile professional nearby with identical 672 million damage numbers before anyone could understand what happened. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Yin Shengnan discovered a cursed blood domain buff source from Chen Yong, healing allies massively while removing debuffs and dealing enemies hundreds of millions per second. The duration stretched absurdly long. She searched wildly for Chen Yong, hoping to attach herself to the legendary carry, before checking faction announcements instead. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. Millions of professionals across Sea Kingdom reached similar disbelief. Fan Laba also learned the faction had vanished and wondered whether some hidden deity had intervened. His Abyss contact Zulo dismissed Sea God involvement because Harmon's forces imprisoned her avatar. They instead suspected secret Great Qin intervention behind the catastrophe. Some victories still left scars behind. Fan believed official Great Qin forces were uninvolved. Zulo then revealed Harmon himself was preparing an incarnation, immediately changing the assassin's confidence. The Empire gained another strategic advantage. Divine manifestations ranged from weak ritual shadows to remnant soul avatars, historical projections, and finally incarnations, true divine power compressed to fit a world's level limits. His enemies discovered death had paperwork. Chen Yong had killed only an avatar before. An incarnation meant Harmon was personally furious enough to descend within restrictions, and Fan expected the problem solved. Other nations reacted differently. Russian-aligned forces sought cooperation with Great Qin, while Indian forces dismissed danger and launched a large carrier expedition toward Deer Island. Their carrier sank almost immediately after departure, forcing salvage operations. Korean forces preferred holding entertainment celebrations, reacting to faction destruction with prolonged festivities. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. American commanders, meanwhile, demanded international condemnation, interpreting the enormous casualties as state-backed Great Qin aggression rather than one professional's impossible skill chain. Many foreign leaders assumed Deer Island and East Fuji could only have fallen through national intervention. Chen Yong's individual involvement seemed mathematically unbelievable. The shoreline offered no neutral ground. Great Qin officials received diplomatic pressure while simultaneously trying to understand their own citizen. Every report made conventional explanations less useful than the previous one. Chen Yong ignored the international noise and followed the hidden quest marker across the ocean, focused on reaching the Abyss Temple before the 5-hour window expired. Alex's speed carried him rapidly through contested waters. The Night Queen constantly monitored hostile signatures, while Tide, the Arowana princess, provided support through sea-linked abilities. Ocean politics had become unexpectedly violent. His revived faction now had meaningful territory, but Abyss forces remained dominant. Reaching their principal temple meant entering the strongest enemy region deliberately. Chen Yong considered that excellent design. Hidden rewards usually lived where sensible people refused to go, and sensible behavior had never powered his build anyway. Before reaching the temple, he encountered additional Abyss patrols and hostile professionals. Blood Curse reduced ordinary resistance into background notifications rather than meaningful battles. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. His spirit-scaled curse range had become so enormous that localized skirmishes could trigger consequences far beyond what nearby enemies understood when attacking him. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. The Night Queen's true perception also made stealth increasingly unreliable. Several hidden scouts died before reporting Chen Yong's route, feeding more souls into King's space. Fan Laoba's assassination unit eventually converged near the Abyss Temple, supported by Zulo, a powerful lobster-race shaman prophet and devoted follower of Harmon. Another assumption quietly collapsed, without warning. The team expected level suppression, stealth, Abyss buffs, and coordinated assassinations to overwhelm Chen Yong despite his public statistics. Their intelligence was already outdated. When Chen Yong reached the area, Tide immediately cleansed slowing effects, restoring normal movement for Alex, skeleton troops, and every allied summon around him. His army made solitude, mostly theoretical. Defensive skeleton warriors surrounded Chen Yong and Tide. Fan Laba mocked the formation because ghost shadow assassins could bypass ordinary frontline protection entirely. 5 invisible killers moved around the shields at millions of agility. The Night Queen's true perception, however, showed Chen Yong every position perfectly. Another enemy became experienced remarkably quickly. Rather than trade attacks, Chen Yong used Sea God's blessing and simply stepped upward into the air. The simultaneous assassination strike hit nothing but empty space. Fan Laoba's daggers collided with his own allies, breaking stealth. He looked upward in disbelief and demanded how Chen Yong could casually fly. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Chen Yong answered with a grin and blood curse. 35 billion damage smashed into Fan Laoba, who immediately activated a life-saving invulnerability skill. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. 90 billion HP suddenly seemed less impressive when 3 attacks could erase it. Fan privately questioned whether Qin Tianyi's talent obsession had justified this suicide mission. Meanwhile, the 4 subordinate assassins began losing nearly 700 million HP every second. They scattered and swallowed cleansing medicine, but cursed blood remained. Nothing involving blood stayed simple long. Fan ordered Zulo to dispel the curse. Every shaman cleansing totem failed, forcing Fan to inspect the description and discover only a demigod could remove it. The assassins had minutes at best and no demigod conveniently waiting nearby. Fan reached the only remaining solution: kill Chen Yong before the curse killed them. Zulo prepared ranged elemental magic because the assassins could not reach Chen Yong in midair. With 13 million spirit, his water attack carried devastating theoretical power. The projectile struck Chen Yong's automatic crimson shield and displayed 0 damage. Zulo and the assassins stared as 13 million spirit magic failed to crack his defense. Chen Yong declared his turn and summoned the Seabone Giant. The colossal hero raised its sword toward Zulo, whose invincibility remained unavailable on cooldown. The sea carried consequences in silence. Ancient Emperor's sword triggered execution. Zulo's 150 billion HP meant nothing. His head separated instantly before the level 200 Abyss Leader could enter later boss phases. Fan Laoba and his surviving assassins finally understood the scale difference. Harmon's blessing had multiplied their strength, yet Chen Yong's summons still executed their main boss casually. With cursed blood continuing to drain them, fear replaced professionalism. Fan dropped to his knees and begged God Yong for mercy, promising permanent obedience afterward. The others joined him. Chen Yong asked whether they would have spared him if the assassination succeeded, leaving all 5 men speechless because everyone knew the answer. Before their silence resolved, thunder shook the Abyss Temple. Blood clouds gathered and a massive fissure opened above, announcing Harmon's promised incarnation. Nothing involving blood stayed simple long. The Night Queen detected the god immediately through prey tracking. Fan's terror transformed into hope as he laughed that Chen Yong finally faced something unbeatable. The Night Queen explained, an incarnation carried genuine divine blood and near-authentic power suppressed only enough to enter the local world safely. Another world meant another dangerous opportunity. Chen Yong asked whether it was technically the god itself. The answer was complicated, so he simplified again. Could the Night Queen kill it? She admitted uncertainty. A fully charged precision shot ignored level mechanisms, but she had never tested absolute hit-piercing damage against genuine divine power. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Fan mocked the idea that mortals could kill Harmon. Chen Yong ignored him and ordered Tide to stack every available support buff onto the Night Queen. Her fully charged shot gained enormous range, amplified damage, guaranteed accuracy, and level mechanism penetration. She drew the bow and held it for 50 seconds. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Then a black dragon-shaped arrow tore through the sky and struck Harmon's descending incarnation for 365 billion damage before the divine being completed its arrival. At East Seaport, meanwhile, faction war had removed normal level limits, allowing Great Qin to send high-level reinforcements from all 4 major legions. The Empire gained another strategic advantage. Vice Deans around level 180 returned alongside Zhang Zhaoxi, who secretly carried Qin Tianyi's instructions to coordinate foreign combat teams against Chen Yong. Levels were becoming mere administrative details. Teleportation zones were packed with professionals, and initial entry points clustered around Dark Moon Island, the same area where Chen Yong had first appeared in Sea Kingdom. Thunder then rolled over the entire East Sea. Blood clouds formed and a crimson spatial rift opened, visible to forces from multiple factions simultaneously. The silence carried more than words. A blood-red divine temple appeared inside the vortex, projecting crushing pressure across the sea. Even level 180 experts felt immediate mortal danger. Qin Bing, Xiao Chen, Su Chacha, and lower-level professionals reacted worse. Many collapsed physically under divine pressure before any actual attack occurred. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. Zhang Zhaoxi recognized Harmon's descent and stared with a mixture of terror and secret worship. Until then, he had known the blood god only through statues. The enormous crimson serpent finally emerged from the rift, wings spread across the sky and a body stretching more than 1,000 meters. That wound would not disappear quickly. Harmon's first words were not subtle. The incarnation roared Chen Yong's name and condemned the great Qin ant, who repeatedly destroyed divine manifestations. Everyone hearing the god froze. Chen Yong had awakened less than 10 days earlier, yet a god had now crossed worlds specifically to hunt him. The implications sounded impossible until another black arrow suddenly appeared over the sea, already traveling toward Harmon's enormous head at catastrophic speed. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. Professionals from every faction watched the shot connect, while few understood where it originated or why someone apparently considered divine retaliation a target opportunity. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. The damage number 365 billion hung over Harmon's incarnation like a public insult. Even senior Great Qin experts temporarily forgot how breathing worked. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Back at the Abyss Temple, Fan, Laoba, and surviving assassins watched the same result nearby, their renewed confidence evaporating before Harmon even launched a counterattack. Chen Yang studied the gods' response while Tide maintained buffs and the Night Queen prepared follow-up attacks, knowing one successful shot did not guarantee victory. Harmon's incarnation possessed divine mechanics, enormous attributes, and access to weakened true god skills, far beyond anything ordinary Sea Kingdom bosses could imitate. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Yet Chen Yang now had multiple survival states: Sea God mobility, Alex's protection, Tide's support, enormous undead armies, and Night Queen anti-level precision shot. For perhaps the first time, the battle looked genuinely uncertain rather than one-sided. That uncertainty made Chen Yang more excited than frightened. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. Fan Laoba considered escaping, but Blood Curse still ticked relentlessly. His assassination mission had transformed into being trapped between an angry god and the target. The four subordinate assassins were already nearing death despite every potion and buff they possessed. Demigod-level cleansing remained unavailable, exactly as Blood Curse promised. Divine Authority was losing its mystique. King's Space waited for their souls while skeleton warriors held ground below. Chen Yang had effectively converted the temple battlefield into layered protection around himself. Tide's songs continued neutralizing negative effects, making many divine or abyss control mechanics less dangerous as long as the Arowana princess remained protected. No joke could soften that truth. The Seabone Giant stayed close enough to execute vulnerable bosses, while Alex guarded aerial threats, despite being statistically weaker than Chen Yang's newest unique heroes. Harmon's arrival also alerted every Sea Kingdom power that the faction war had escalated beyond professional conflict into direct divine intervention. The sea carried consequences in silence. Great Qin commanders realized Chen Yang's actions were no longer simply personal progression. His survival might determine imperial fortune, faction balance, and wider political consequences. Foreign forces faced the same reality from the opposite direction. Anyone planning to exploit Chen Yang's death first needed Harmon to accomplish what entire fleets had failed. Chen Yang remained focused on the god rather than politics. If Harmon could be killed, the divine soul, advancement value, and fortune rewards might transform everything again. The possibility was ludicrous, but so had been clearing Eternal Kingdom, enslaving Alex, reviving Arowana influence, and reaching level 150 within days. His level curve kept breaking expectations. Fan Loba's kneeling plea went unanswered. Chen Yang believed attempted assassins deserved less sympathy than people they had intended to kill without warning. As Harmon stabilized its incarnation, blood-red energy gathered around the sky. The true confrontation was finally beginning rather than ending with one devastating arrow. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. The Night Queen shifted position in midair, maintaining distance, where precision shot and her superior tracking offered maximum advantage against the gigantic divine target. Chen Yang ordered Tide to prioritize cleansing, healing, and defensive buffs. Protecting the support unit had already proven more valuable than chasing damage recklessly. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Skeleton formations spread below, prepared to absorb area attacks or create guardian interception layers if Harmon targeted the Arowana princess again. The skeleton ranks answered without hesitation. The Seabone Giant gripped its enormous sword, waiting for an opportunity where execution mechanics might interact with the incarnation despite divine resistance. Every Tide seemed to carry trouble. Alex circled Chen Yang protectively. Though no longer his strongest summon, her permanent contract and damage transfer bond still made her survival strategically important. Across East Seaport, Great Qin reinforcements stared toward the Divine Rift, aware that whatever happened next would immediately reshape the realm's faction war. Great Qin would feel these consequences. Zhang Zhaoxi secretly hoped Harmon would kill Chen Yang, yet witnessing divine pressure firsthand made him understand how reckless Qin Tiany's entire scheme had become. The battlefield had outgrown hidden assassination politics. A level 180 killer team was suddenly background noise beside a god, unique heroes, and national fortune warfare. Even Divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Harmon descended farther, blood mist spreading around the Abyss Temple while divine hostility locked fully onto Chen Yang and his increasingly impossible collection of allies. Chen Yang lifted Blood God's curse and smiled. If a god had come personally for him, then refusing the boss fight would simply be rude. Harmon's incarnation descended over Darkmoon Island, roaring that Chen Yang had destroyed his avatar and imprisoned his soul, promising 10,000 years of bloodfire. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Professionals across the Sea Kingdom froze. Chen Yang had awakened less than 10 days earlier, yet apparently a god now considered him a personal problem. Before Harmon could finish making divine threats, the Night Queen's black dragon arrow struck his head, blasting away 365 billion damage and everyone's remaining composure. Those numbers made resistance look pointless. Qin Bing, foreign professionals, assassins, and spectators stared upward speechlessly. Apparently, divine dignity had become another health bar. Chen Yong's party could aggressively negotiate. Harmon had descended through a level 200 demigod incarnation, expecting effortless revenge. Instead, divine blood sprayed from his skull before his dramatic entrance had properly landed. Realizing the body was doomed, Harmon abandoned it and fled as a remnant soul. Chen Yong pursued immediately, casting soul extraction with absolutely zero respect. 90 billion damage later, Harmon vanished into King's space. Chen Yong gained 5 billion experience, another noble slot, and the ability to appoint a viscount. The system offered to promote Harmon's captured soul. Chen Yong declined instantly. Rewarding an enemy after beating him felt like tipping someone who attempted murder. Instead, he promoted Tide's mother, Chao Hao, to viscount and ordered her to educate Harmon thoroughly. Given their history, supervision would certainly be enthusiastic. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Fan Laoba trembled while Chen Yong smiled. Watching an Arowana mother discipline a captured god's soul was not remotely how anyone expected divine warfare to work. Great Qin had once possessed divine protectors, but its founding ancestor rejected their blessings and killed the god offering them, choosing independence over heavenly sponsorship. That rebellion brought endless retaliation. 25 divine incarnations eventually forced the Qin ancestor away, while later wars shrank Great Qin's territory, fortune, and global dominance. Fan Loba wondered whether Chen Yong had just invited another civilization-shaking catastrophe, or whether Great Qin had somehow produced a second god-killing lunatic right on schedule. Then the Abyss Temple rose from the sea. Harmon's spilled divine blood shattered its curse, and gray haze peeled away as sunlight returned across the kingdom. A breathtaking woman wearing ceremonial robes emerged from the temple. Chen Yong recognized the sea god's avatar as she sent a small blue bottle toward him. The sea god asked him to take Tide away because the little Arowana could no longer remain safely in this world. Chen Yong readily agreed. Tide's invincibility, cleansing, amplification, and control resistance made her absurdly valuable anyway. The sea god thanked him, promising they would meet again someday. Divine authority was losing its mystique. The bottle proved even stranger, a soul-bound divine artifact capable of holding living beings, souls, oceans, islands, stars, suns, and apparently reasonable storage limits nowhere. Chen Yong's consciousness entered its endless inner ocean. Before he finished admiring it, cursed blood killed Fan Loba and 4 level 150 Abyss assassins elsewhere. That outcome arrived faster than expected. Rewards flooded in, 50 billion experience, an exclusive skill, ancient rewards, 2,600, fortune contribution, national fortune, and enough levels to push Chen Yong to 172. The Sea Kingdom officially cleared after 72 hours. Projected 80-person dungeon versions unlocked, while every Abyss faction professional had already been eliminated from the conflict. The silence carried more than words. The Arowana faction won with 70% influence among more than 24 million participants. Chen Yong alone somehow held 100% of its contribution score. Great Qin gained enormous national fortune while rival nations suffered losses. High-level reinforcements arrived just in time to discover the war had already ended. Great Qin would feel these consequences. Because Chen Yong represented Great Qin, the Empire effectively gained control over future Sea Kingdom dungeon access. International diplomacy had apparently become another solo clear reward. Qin Bing stood stunned. He had known Chen Yong for years at school, yet everything after Class Awakening had exceeded what any teacher could reasonably predict. Zhang Zhaoxi understood the uglier implication. Qin Tianyi had already moved against Chen Yong, and Chen Yong had become strong enough that somebody was probably dying soon. Zheng fled immediately, while Qin Tianyi's loyalists rushed reports home. Chen Yong ignored them all. Enemies planning tomorrow mattered less than loot available today. Equipment mattered less than raw scaling. Fan Laoba's equipment confirmed the alliance with Blood God Harmon. High-end Abyss gear and blessings explained Qin Tianyi's monstrous growth, but also exposed exactly whose Li she wore. Chen Yong opened his fortune panel and found 1,000 contribution, the Xiaoming position, 3 fate slots, and a fate fragment costing an offensive 4,000. The description claimed fate could break heaven and earth restraints. Chen Yong suspected this was the genuine path toward godhood, assuming the system stopped pricing everything like luxury property. Ordinary professionals might never gather enough contribution to discover fate at all. Chen Yong simply complained about how many worlds he apparently needed to save. Talent upgrading offered 2 choices: improve replication directly, or raise his overall aptitude and gain a new talent. Chen Yong immediately chose the broader upgrade. More summons were no longer enough. Future bosses could invalidate entire armies through immunity or control, so Chen Yong needed power that strengthened the king himself. His new E-rank talent was balance. Whichever core attribute was highest would raise the other 3 to match. Chen Yong stared at the description twice. His spirit already sat at 240 million. Balance instantly dragged strength, agility, and constitution to the same ridiculous number, creating a perfectly balanced monstrosity. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. His panel now looked less like a mage build and more like someone had selected every stat, typed maximum, then calmly saved the character. Stats had stopped resembling normal progression. Balance would have been mediocre on most professionals, whose best attributes remained limited. Combined with Chen Yang's billion-point cheat, it became another cheat nested inside itself. A normal mage ignored strength. A warrior ignored spirit. Chen Yang could now swing a staff physically for absurd damage while still functioning as walking magical artillery. His next aptitude upgrade required 2,000 fortune contribution, while 3 fate fragments demanded 12,000. Apparently, saving worlds had become his new rewards program. The ancient skill, King's Sacrifice, summoned a bone scythe, dealing enormous soul, true damage, and temporarily converted anything it killed into king-class creatures. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Chen Yang immediately imagined an army of converted kings. He still intended to use enemies rather than random civilians. Even cheaters needed standards somewhere. Another ancient skill, King's Baptism, raised a contracted creature's attributes by half his spirit and forced that creature to intercept all damage aimed at him. If the baptized creature died, it became temporarily untargetable, revived later, and transferred 100 times its attributes to Chen Yang for 10 seconds. Arithmetic had become another supernatural weapon. Chen Yang chose the Red Dragon Queen for baptism. She was his first permanent servant, and apparently loyalty finally came with benefits beyond carrying him everywhere. A dark green pillar pierced the heavens as King Aura poured into red. The Night Queen and Seabone Giant watched with unmistakable envy, despite their usual composure. Both were genuine high-level undead beings, yet Chen Yang's favor had elevated the younger dragon directly. Even supernatural monsters could apparently experience workplace jealousy. Progression was no longer remotely normal. Red transformed into dragon form, screaming as enormous king energy rebuilt her body. Her flames turned green, her frame expanded, and her attributes climbed violently. When the transformation ended, every core attribute had reached 120 million. The once decorative dragon companion had become a top-tier combat unit with terrifying scaling. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. Red knelt gratefully. Chen Yang helped her rise and praised her improvement, apparently unaware that telling a dragon her strength got bigger sounded suspiciously suggestive. Next, he asked Tide whether she truly wanted to follow him. Despite the sea god's request, Chen Yang refused to decide the little Arowana's future without asking. Tide explained through gestures that leaving the magical sea would strip away much of her power. Chen Yang needed Red to translate the aquatic charades. Chen Yang laughed and promised to care for her, even as an ordinary fish. Tide immediately chose companionship over magic, nodding without hesitation. The joke landed better than expected. Her simple heart explained why the sea god favored the Arowana race. Chen Yang opened the sea spirit bottle and invited Tide to enter willingly. Blue light absorbed her, turning Tide into a soul pet without hostile binding. Her skills, divine favor, and overwhelming dislike of male professionals remained intact. Chen Yang read the final trait twice. She specifically hated male professionals. He quietly decided that adopting her probably did not count as kidnapping. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Victory chests produced golden equipment, an abyss blood shield, Wrath of the Sea, and another King's Bone impressive treasures, though most remained annoyingly unusable. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. 3 identical golden King's Bones could no longer be coincidence. Chen Yang decided to ask Yu Hongyi, whose age and experience made her conveniently searchable history. He left the temple riding red, carrying Night and Tide while dismissing the Seabone Giant. East Seaport's waiting audience received only a distant dragon silhouette. Chen Yang no longer bothered traveling quietly. After everything he had accomplished, pretending to be an ordinary rookie would have required more acting than strength. 10 minutes later, Red reached Yuzhou. Chen Yang messaged Yu Hongyi, then visited the trading market to sell loot and purchase every caster passive available. Manager Yin Chunhong greeted him enthusiastically, nearly losing a battle with her blouse buttons. Chen Yang wisely focused on business, where the danger was lower. He emptied mountains of equipment into her warehouse and ordered 1 copy of every compatible caster passive. Employees immediately began counting the Necromancer yard sale. Chen Yang learned more than 100 passives without reading most descriptions. Only afterward did he notice nothing available exceeded level 200. Progression was no longer remotely normal. Yin explained that 4th advancement equipment and skills were controlled through Yuzhou Legion War Merit exchanges. Independent progression became deliberately painful after roughly level 60. Chen Yang frowned at the institutional monopoly, but before Yin could elaborate, an employee rushed inside, announcing that her son had been captured. Some victories still left scars behind. Yin shot upright, spilled tea across Chen Yang, apologized repeatedly, then demanded details. The emergency instantly erased every ounce of her earlier business composure. The employee named Qin Sanjin. Chen Yang finally realized that the shameless man calling him Dad Yang was actually Yin Chunhong's son. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Learning Yuzhou Legion members had seized him, Yin cursed Qin Tianyi and fainted from shock. Chen Yang caught her before she hit the floor. Recruitment had become its own battlefield. Night quickly located Qin Tianyi and Qin Sanjin, 50 kilometers north, halfway up Yinshan Mountain. Chen Yang carried Yin outside and summoned Red immediately. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. The dragon launched across Yuzhou at full speed, breaking city flight regulations spectacularly. Chen Yang had upgraded from keeping low profile to becoming municipal paperwork. Giant combat pets were forbidden over major cities, so officials and spectators immediately pursued the dragon. Chen Yang had accidentally scheduled a public scandal. Witnesses quietly recalculated everything they knew. Red headed straight toward Yinshan, Yuzhou Legion headquarters. Yin woke high above the city and nearly screamed before noticing Chen Yang holding her safely. She misunderstood the embrace until Chen Yang explained he was Qin Sanjin's friend. Their bizarre father-son nickname arrangement could wait for a less airborne conversation. When asked about Qin Tianyi, Yin panicked and begged Chen Yang to find Yue Hongyi. Qin Tianyi intended to extract their son's talent. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Chen Yang finally learned Qin Sanjin was Qin Tianyi's illegitimate son, and that Qin Tianyi had already extracted one talent from him at age 10. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. The revelation raised horrifying questions about talent extraction, childhood awakening, and Yue Hongyi's marriage. Knight interrupted the speculation by announcing their arrival. His talent made normal comparisons useless. Two guards blocked the secret base. Chen Yang casually slapped one aside before Yin could explain, delivering 1.2 billion damage with deeply excessive efficiency. The guard died instantly, terrifying Yin and his partner. Chen Yang calmly told the survivor to inspect the corpse's class record before panicking. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. The dead guard proved to be a Japanese infiltrator. His surviving partner immediately changed from horrified colleague to enthusiastic corpse kicker with impressive ideological flexibility. More patrols appeared, and Chen Yang discovered additional infiltrators throughout the supposedly secure Yuzhou base. He killed them while wondering who had approved security. That outcome arrived faster than expected. Knight led him into an underground laboratory, where Qin Sanjin lay strapped to an iron table surrounded by grotesque surgical machinery and white-coated demons. The lead researcher was a level 300 Abyss blood demon specializing in surgery, separation, and talent extraction, a resume that should never have passed human resources. Talent scaling became increasingly absurd afterward. Chen Yang finally understood Qin Tianyi's secret. The patriarch had been harvesting talents through abyssal biological techniques rather than any legitimate class-holder system. That talent changed his options immediately. The plan was horrifyingly effective: collect golden talents, then undergo abyssal transformation for multiplied attributes. Qin Tianyi was trying to manufacture himself into a monster. Yin screamed for her son. Qin Sanjin saw Chen Yang and immediately yelled, "Dad, save me." His mother received several emotional disasters simultaneously. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Before Chen Yang could explain the nickname, Qin Tianyi laughed from nearby, joking about Yue Hongyi and Yin, while revealing himself inside the laboratory. Tubes connected Qin Tianyi to tanks holding talented young victims. Yin collapsed at the sight, while Chen Yang's expression hardened beyond any remaining patience. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Soul extraction detonated through the laboratory, killing hundreds of infiltrators and the level 300 demon professor. Qin Tianyi's health emptied too, yet he remained seated. Qin Sanjin stared. Chen Yang had reached 90 billion true damage within days, but somehow Qin Tianyi had absorbed it without actually dying. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Chen Yang calmly ordered him to stop hiding. Qin Tianyi laughed that 25 years of secrecy had been exposed by one irritating young necromancer. The joke landed better than expected. Blood mist flooded the laboratory. Chen Yang grabbed Yin and ordered Red outside, while the dragon's flames repeatedly produced nothing but 0 damage numbers. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Red smashed through the building carrying Qin Sanjin iron bed included while Chen Yang and Knight escaped. Seconds later, the entire underground base exploded. Officials and spectators gathered outside, stunned that someone had just demolished a Yuzhou Legion facility inside the Qin clan's own territory. The Legion hierarchy suddenly looked fragile. The deputy commander tried arresting Chen Yang, but an ancient white-haired guardian appeared and stopped him, warning that he was nowhere near strong enough. Everyone bowed to Elder Li Changfu, one of Great Qin's centuries-old guardian figures. Then the elder immediately scolded Chen Yang for causing chaos. Great Qin would feel these consequences. Hearing Chen Yang's name froze the crowd. His heroic clears, mythic class, eternal kingdom conquest, and sea kingdom victory had already made him famous nationwide. Chen Yang, however, did not recognize Li Changfu. The elder nearly lost his beard, discovering that national fame apparently did not guarantee reciprocal celebrity. Ancient experience still demanded careful respect. The deputy commander hurriedly explained Li's status. Li expected an apology. Chen Yang instead accused the guardian elder of overlooking demonic infiltration beneath his nose. Li bristled, warning that Yue Hongyi's favor did not grant unlimited insolence. Chen Yang's smile suggested he considered evidence more useful than seniority. The implication landed harder than expected. Li initially rejected the accusation. The Yuzhou Legion descended from the Qin ancestor. Admitting abyss corruption there would be historically embarrassing beyond description. The Legion hierarchy suddenly looked fragile. Then the secret base erupted with blood-black demonic energy. Li instantly recognized abyssal power and ordered evacuation, while formation mages activated Yuzhou's defenses. Blood magic always complicated the arithmetic. 3 more top experts arrived: a white-robed scholar, a sword-carrying Taoist woman, and a massive axeman. Together they prepared to contain the threat. Chen Yong openly questioned whether Li's brain had retired alongside his eyesight. Li exploded again, proving centuries of cultivation had not improved his temper. Rewards usually meant larger problems afterward. Chen Yong clarified the problem. Qin Tianyi had undergone complete abyssal transformation and accepted blood god Harmon's blessing. This was not exactly recoverable youthful rebellion. Such transformations offered enormous early power, but permanently chained growth, freedom, and even descendants to external masters. The Qin ancestor had rejected precisely that fate. The Taoist woman voted simply to kill Qin Tianyi. The scholar agreed. The axeman admitted strategy was not his specialty and followed the majority. Mercy was never part of this. Qin Tianyi emerged shirtless from the inferno before they decided. Blood markings covered him, black flames followed every step, and his aura had become monstrous. Li demanded to know why he chose this path. Qin Tianyi answered by stamping hard enough to fracture Yinshan and shake Yuzhou itself. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Though only level 203rd advancement, Qin Tianyi now displayed power rivaling top 5th advancement experts. The shortcut visibly tempted weaker spectators. Qin Tianyi asked whether the Guardians envied him. They denied it, though the narrator politely declined to pretend hundredfold power was emotionally uncomplicated. Ancient experience still demanded careful respect. He offered introductions to blood god Harmon, promising them strength, approaching 6th advancement. Even veteran Guardians felt the temptation before remembering the attached divine leash. Li angrily refused. Qin Tianyi argued ordinary cultivation might never reach godhood, presenting servitude as practical career advancement with catastrophically bad contractual terms. Godhood looked less untouchable around him. Divine blessings were never freely distributed. Even favored races inherited ceilings, marks, and generational costs, rather than unlimited power from generous cosmic benefactors. The implication landed harder than expected. Abyssal transformation was worse, slavery dressed as optimization. Qin Tianyi nevertheless demanded Chen Yong and Qin Sanjin in exchange for summoning Harmon's blessing. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Yin furiously called him inhuman for sacrificing his own son. Qin Tianyi laughed, admitting Qin Sanjin had only ever been a blood pet. Qin Sanjin finally understood his childhood neglect, desperate training, and extracted talent. His father had never expected him to inherit anything except an operating table. He stepped beside Chen Yong and declared Qin Tianyi unworthy of being his father. Chen Yong nearly coughed himself unconscious at the brutal simplicity. Urban regulations had officially lost control. Even during an abyss crisis, spectators silently enjoyed the family drama. Apparently, humanity could multitask when the gossip quality became sufficiently premium. Qin Sanjin repeated that a traitor who harvested children deserved death. Qin Tianyi's rage exploded, releasing violent blood mist across the mountain. That wound would not disappear quickly. Chen Yong ordered Sanjin to evacuate Yin and asked Li's group to seal Yinshan. 4 pillars immediately rose around the mountain. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. Qin Tianyi mocked the idea of a one-on-one fight. Chen Yong reminded him that asking a necromancer for honorable single combat misunderstood the entire profession. Red's green dragonfire and Knight's arrow struck first, yet Qin Tianyi emerged unharmed, casually deflecting the attack while demanding Chen Yong show more. The battlefield offered no easy compromise. His true transformed body stood nearly 5 meters tall, with crimson wings, horn, spear, and blood markings. He had become a blood demon spear sovereign. His health reached 200 billion and core attributes surpassed 10 million, backed by abyssal enhancement, Harmon's blessing, and a blood emperor contract. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. Chen Yong finally understood why Qin Tianyi dismissed Yue Hongyi. The patriarch's transformed strength already approached 5th advancement territory despite remaining only level 200. Qin Tianyi laughed that nobody understood gods, then split open an abyss rift. Crimson lightning flashed as genuine demons began pouring through. The silence carried more than words. Hellhounds, goat-headed demons, and giants emerged around level 180, each carrying boss-level health. To ordinary professionals, the invasion looked like immediate apocalypse. Another boss discovered terrible timing today. Li warned Chen Yong to stop them because the Guardians could not abandon the barrier. Yu Hongyi prepared to intervene from a distant mountaintop. Ancient experience still demanded careful respect. A plain-clothed elder beside Yue stopped her, noting Chen Yong clearly intended to kill Qin Tianyi, and interference might prevent that outcome. Yu hesitated because Qin Tianyi had once been her husband. The elder imprisoned her in place, revealing power that made her realize he was demigod tier. The elder dismissed the title and watched Chen Yong with fascination. Meanwhile, Chen Yong mocked Qin Tianyi for becoming someone's dog and feeling superior. Seniority offered surprisingly little protection here. Qin Tianyi demanded respect. Chen Yong promised death instead, then summoned enormous bone gates as endless skeleton troops flooded into the mountain battlefield. Undead and abyssal armies collided immediately. Yuzhou's guardians finally understood how Chen Yong had solo-cleared worlds. His party resembled national military mobilization. Old authority met a newer problem. The plain-clothed elder recognized similarities to the Qin ancestors' abilities but refused to explain them, smiling while Yu Hongyi became even more curious. Qin Tianyi responded by cutting his palm and summoning a gigantic blood-red gate, challenging Chen Yong to outproduce the abyss itself. Blood debts rarely stayed metaphorical here. A demon, hundreds of meters tall, stepped through wearing crimson armor, followed by endless lesser troops. Its presence made the entire battlefield feel suddenly smaller. The creature was the level 200 shadow of the abyssal blood demon, carrying 280 billion health and multiple blood emperor and Harmon-derived powers. Blood magic always complicated the arithmetic. Civilians across Yuzhou panicked, even ordinary heroic bosses looked harmless beside something this enormous, and the barrier became everyone's favorite piece of infrastructure. Boss mechanics rarely survived his arrival. Yin asked whether Chen Yang could still win. Qin Sanjin looked genuinely offended that his mother would question the strength of Dad Yang. The silence carried more than words. Yin scolded him for calling a same-aged man father. Sanjin simply asked whether she preferred he call Qin Tiani that, ending the argument efficiently. Yin's embarrassment deepened when she looked toward Chen Yang and briefly noticed he seemed unusually dependable. Family trauma apparently had terrible timing for romantic optics. Meanwhile, Qin Tiani's endless blood demon reinforcements pressed Chen Yang's skeletons backward, convincing even the hidden demigod that the young necromancer faced genuine danger. Even divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. The elder reminded Yu that summoning her ghost emperor could solve everything, but Qin Tiani's blood emperor contract meant her intervention would certainly kill him. Yu finally chose Great Qin over old feelings and began forming seals. Before she completed them, thunder split the heavens and ancient bones descended. The empire gained another strategic advantage. The hidden elder burst into laughter, declaring Great Qin might be witnessing another emperor's birth as a colossal white jade bone awakened overhead. The sea bone giant emerged, calling the blood demon a cur that threatened its master, then drew the bone emperor's sword and attacked. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. Their collision shook 100 kilometers and terrified Yuzhou, despite the barrier. Spectators stared at Chen Yang with the sort of worship normally requiring organized religion. Chen Yang knew nothing about his growing fan club. He simply smiled at Qin Tiani and invited him to continue the performance he had enjoyed. Qin Tiani launched Dragon Annihilation, a third advancement spear finisher traveling too quickly for normal professionals to perceive, much less dodge. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Chen Yang merely tilted his head and caught the enormous blood-red spear barehanded. The crowd reacted like someone had casually intercepted a missile. Blood magic always complicated the arithmetic. Even 5th Advancement Guardians failed to follow his movement. Qin Tiani immediately assumed Chen Yang had undergone abyssal transformation too, because reality seemed less believable. Seniority offered surprisingly little protection here. Chen Yang laughed. Times changed. Cheating is fashionable. Then he punched Qin Tiani with 242 million strength and agility behind an almost invisible fist. More than 1 billion damage launched Qin Tiani through multiple buildings. The transformed warrior survived, but his dignity arrived several seconds later by separate courier. Qin Tiani charged again, roaring. Chen Yang appeared directly before him and stomped him into Yinshan before the man could establish another dramatic stance. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Then, Chen Yang planted cursed blood into Qin Tiani, creating a 20,000-kilometer hostile target aura dealing hundreds of millions every second for years. Qin Tiani finally panicked. His real body possessed enormous defenses, yet the curse still struck for tens of billions and required demigod-level cleansing. Divine authority was losing its mystique. He immediately proposed sitting down to discuss the misunderstanding. Chen Yang recognized the ancient villain tradition of discovering diplomacy after losing the advantage. Common sense quietly left the conversation. Qin Tiani privately planned to flee into the abyss and seek revenge later. Chen Yang simply asked whether he still possessed any invincibility skills. Mercy was never part of this. A white bone scythe materialized in Chen Yang's hand. Qin Tiani realized too late that he had already spent every invulnerability trick while showing off. The scythe fell with 216 billion true damage, cutting Qin Tiani in half and carving a massive scar across Yinshan behind him. Damage scaling had abandoned common decency. Dying, Qin Tiani finally remembered that mythic-class monsters ignored normal logic. He regretted not killing Chen Yang before greed convinced him to steal everything. Qin Tiani's soul escaped his corpse, screaming regret. Chen Yang opened King's space immediately. Leaving a revenge-obsessed enemy recoverable would be professionally irresponsible. That wound would not disappear quickly. Before the soul entered, blood-red lightning shattered the vortex. Harmon's furious voice thundered overhead, proving divine villains also believe strongly in recurring appearances. Blood clouds covered Yuzhou. Night, Red, and the Seabone Giant immediately shielded Chen Yang, as everyone recognized another incarnation of blood god Harmon. Divine authority was losing its mystique. Harmon fired a blood spear at Night. Chen Yang kicked Qin Tiani's corpse into its path, accidentally finding one final practical use for the traitor. Red transformed and carried Chen Yang and Night directly toward the clouds. The hidden elder laughed, predicting the brat might genuinely kill another god. Divine authority was losing its mystique. Yu called the idea absurd. The elder reminded her that the Qin ancestor had supposedly killed a god around level 20, which recalibrated absurd. Even divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. He explained, the ancestor's first advancement itself required divine murder, possibly because of his mythic class. Yu decided the system clearly hated reasonable career paths. Harmon finally revealed a level 300 incarnation with more than 100 million attributes and 3 trillion health, stretching a crimson boss bar across the heavens. Blood spears rained toward them. Chen Yong entrusted Red with defense, grabbed Knight, and jumped away, while the dragon deliberately absorbed the attacks. Nobody nearby considered that remotely normal. Red's health vanished, triggering King's baptism. Her body became untargetable spirit form while 100 times her attributes transferred temporarily into Chen Yong. Harmon barely understood the sacrifice before a bone blade and dragon sword struck for tens of trillions, instantly deleting his 3 trillion health incarnation. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. System rewards exploded. Harmon's remnant soul, King's worship, quest progress, purification, and level 180. Chen Yong ignored everything while the temporary enhancement remained active. He caught the fallen Red gently after her revival and summoned Tide to help heal her, prioritizing his companion over celebrating the divine kill. Mercy was never part of this. Only afterward did Yuzo recover enough to scream about the 91 trillion damage number. Chen Yong's fan club effectively became a spontaneous civic institution. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. People had watched Qin Tianyi nearly destroy their city, then watched Chen Yong crush him and a god. Hero worship was hardly surprising afterward. Even divinity faced inconvenient damage numbers. Yin stared in disbelief while Qin Sanjin proudly declared his dad Yong unbeatable. She quietly asked whether her son could invite Chen Yong home. Sanjin warned that Chen Yong might refuse. Yin merely asked him to try, understanding that relationships, unlike talents, could not be forcibly extracted. That talent changed his options immediately. Li Changfu and the Guardians remained stunned. Their emergency plan had been delaying Harmon until stronger help arrived. Chen Yong had simply removed the emergency. Yue Hongyi compared her own billion-level theoretical maximum with Chen Yong's near 100 trillion strike, and finally accepted that conventional progression had left the conversation. His level curve kept breaking expectations. She understood why he leveled so quickly. Same-level enemies did not fight Chen Yong. They briefly occupied coordinates before becoming experience notifications. Yue also felt relieved she had supported him. Someone this powerful would not forgive betrayal simply because the betrayer had history, beauty, or social status. The hidden elder suggested meeting Great Qin's future pillar. Chen Yong, meanwhile, discovered Harmon's spear had ruined Qin Tianyi's corpse for undead conversion. Great Qin would feel these consequences. He settled for storing Qin Tianyi's soul. The dead patriarch immediately begged forgiveness, understanding that a dark-class master could make death considerably less peaceful. Souls made every victory more complicated. Chen Yong opened King's space and rejected every plea. Qin Tianyi threatened that the Qin ancestor would punish him, but another voice interrupted confidently. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. 2 figures appeared beside him. Qin Tianyi recognized them instantly and realized, with horror, that Great Qin's highest watchers had known far more than expected. The plain-clothed elder revealed that national formations had observed Qin Tianyi's schemes. Chen Yong respectfully stored the traitor's soul once permission became unmistakable. Nobody treated that revelation as entertainment. Yu Hongyi introduced the elder as Han Guoxi, Lord of Mangshan, legendary as the Ice Immortal. Han laughed and called himself merely a formation mage. Li Changfu and the others hurried over. Han immediately scolded them for missing 25 years of infiltration, proving ancient masters still enjoyed performance reviews. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Han warned that he could not protect Great Qin forever. Later, at his Mangshan cottage, he casually demolished Chen Yong across repeated Chinese chess games. Chen Yong had considered himself excellent online, yet after 49 losses he could barely capture pieces. Apparently, transmigration had not transferred Grandmaster matchmaking protection. Things had become complicated remarkably quickly. Yu explained only the Qin ancestor regularly challenged Han. After another checkmate, Han finally asked Chen Yong what questions had brought him there. Chen Yong placed 3 golden king's bones on the table. Han immediately choked on his tea, which answered the question, "Are these ordinary?" rather convincingly. Yui reached toward one and received a fan slap from Han. Chen Yong asked their purpose. Han admitted he had never seen such bones before. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. What Han could sense was imperial divine power. He dismissed ordinary gods as beings unqualified to stand against genuine emperors, startling Chen Yong again. Han advised keeping the bones safe because something carrying such power would not repeatedly reach Chen Yong by coincidence. Their future purpose remained unknown. Nobody nearby found that remotely reassuring. Then Han mentioned Yue's promised gift. Her prepared 3rd advancement golden equipment now looked embarrassingly small beside Chen Yong's post-Sea Kingdom strength. The sea carried consequences in silence. Han offered to invest on Yue's behalf if Chen Yong helped her missing father when possible. He placed a transparent fate fragment before him. Normal expectations kept losing ground rapidly. Han was surprised Chen Yong had already awakened fate. Yu was even more shocked. Despite her 1,000-level strength, she herself had never opened it. Chen Yong complained that saving 2 worlds produced barely enough contribution for 1 expensive fragment. Han laughed and suggested those worlds were simply too low level. Fate normally awakened near level 1000. Han explained that Chen Yong's real contribution surge came from killing Harmon's incarnation, not merely completing national missions. Another enemy became experienced remarkably quickly. Heaven and Earth fortune was finite, Han said. Gods concentrated enormous shares, making divine enemies extremely profitable targets provided one survived the acquisition process. Yu casually mentioned the Qin ancestor had killed a true god around level 20. Qin Yang briefly wondered whether that legendary man possessed an even nastier cheat. Han told him to illuminate his first fate before chasing divine bodies. Chen Yang used the fragment immediately, and starlight merged into him. The human cost remained painfully obvious. He obtained Imperial Fate, Toward the Dawn, granting near immunity below demigod level, massive mitigation against gods, control immunity, and divine enhanced attacks. Divine authority was losing its mystique. Chen Yang stared at the effects. Anything below 6th advancement had essentially lost permission to hurt him, while weaker enemies faced 5,000% bonus damage. The numbers spoke louder than strategy. Han recognized the excellent result and dismissed him moments later. Chen Yang reappeared instantly in Yuzhou and indignantly questioned how Fate's control immunity had failed. News of Yuzhou's battle spread nationwide. Qin Tianyi's abyss betrayal and Chen Yang's divine incarnation kill became impossible for the Qin clan to suppress. The human cost remained painfully obvious. Public trust in the Qin family collapsed. Even worse, every subordinate tied to Qin Tianyi suddenly died, including collaborators who had already fled abroad. Clan elders finally understood Chen Yang's reach and rushed toward Yuzhou to apologize. Other great families followed, only to discover their target had already left. Chen Yang intended to enter the boundary domain and search for Yue's missing father. Yue had advised waiting until 5th advancement. He cheerfully preferred now. Every tide seemed to carry trouble. Yu also asked mercy for the missing Qin Bing. Chen Yang granted exactly one chance for their teacher-student history, leaving the unspoken second outcome obvious. During his stay with Qin Sanjin, Chen Yang kept adding attributes until every core stat reached 500 million, while Red's reached half that. His numbers remained professionally offensive anyway. Riding comfortably on Red's back, Chen Yang studied the boundary domain, a lawless hub connecting countless worlds where race and strength mattered more than nationality. Normally, great Qin professionals joined the army, reached 4th advancement, then waited years for escorted entry. Chen Yang considered 5 to 10-year queues personally offensive. No joke could soften that truth. Senior Han's recommendation required official reporting, irritating Chen Yang. Knights soon announced their arrival at Kunlun's enormous crimson spatial rift. Red charged directly into the rift, shaking the mountains and triggering avalanches. On the other side stretched blue skies, primeval forests, beasts, aircraft, and mechs. The system identified their destination as the boundary domains Fujian Dynasty, a realm linked through countless paths and worlds. Chen Yang finally looked genuinely impressed. His class card guided them toward Great Qin's massive technological city. Street recruiters shouted for dungeon teammates, resurrection specialists, craftsmen, and expensive equipment buyers. The Empire gained another strategic advantage. One woman loudly advertised photographs while seeking someone strong enough to carry her through a level 280 realm. Civilization, Chen Yang observed, remained civilization. Levels were becoming mere administrative details. At military headquarters, General Huo read Han's recommendation and immediately rejected Chen Yang's request for the 6th advancement Myriad Spirits secret realm. Nothing about this quest stayed simple. Huo saw only a level 180 newcomer and ordered Adjutant Xiao Li to place him in recruit training. Chen Yang protested that Han explicitly requested access. News of Chen Yang's true strength had not reached this isolated outpost. General Huo therefore treated him like an impatient rookie and overruled the letter. Xiao Li dragged Chen Yang away, warning that the last person who argued with Huo had spent 30 years mining black ore. Chen reconsidered debate etiquette, asked his class. Chen Yang answered necromancer and refused a squad. Xiao Li wondered whether his new acquaintance secretly wanted a mining career too. Fujian Dynasty was a top-tier transfer world filled with 5th advancement natives and far stronger visiting experts, including 6th advancement guardians like General Huo. None of that distracted Chen Yang from Myriad Spirits. Li Wei urged patience and building strength first. Chen Yang asked why he couldn't build himself inside the secret realm.